No, that's good. That's all I need. Give me hour by hour.
We're in Philadelphia at Rivers Casino and Sportsbook, where Philly loves a winner. Maybe Philly loves a swimmer today because getting here, I had to navigate through a whole lot of flooding. And
Did you work on that line for all morning?
I did, man. I'm fresh to go.
Yeah,
ready to go with the
woke up
one-liners.
about 7 a.m. and said, I'm going to come out with that line.
Philly loves a swimmer?
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
By the way, if you're out there, I'm a good
Pretty good, by the way.
Yeah.
Not bad for him.
I'm Geoff Mosher. This is my Inside the Birds co-host, Adam Caplan. Joining us, as always, former Eagles wide receiver Jason Avant. Let's go. Yeah, let's go. And also, we got our tape breakdown godfather, Greg Cosell. What's up, fellas?
What's happening?
All right, well, I'm pretty sure we don't need the fifth guest today, and that's usually Tropical Storm Caplan, to know that there's going to be rain this morning, rain this afternoon, rain this evening. It's going to be a rain-soaked game as the Eagles welcome the Jacksonville Jaguars. It is yet another reunion game, second week in a row. This time, the Eagles will welcome in their former head coach, Super Bowl champion head coach, Doug Pederson, comes in with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Eagles 3-0, coming off a big win over the Washington Commanders, 24-8. The Jaguars, they went out to the West Coast and they throttled the Chargers 38-10, which sets up a pretty good game today, but one that might be threatened, one that will be threatened with a lot of rain. So I want to ask you right away, Jason Avant, you just got back from beautiful Iowa yesterday, doing sideline radio for the University of Michigan. Good win there. It was beautiful. Now you come home, it's pouring. As a player, how much does this change the game plan as far as the rain? Everything? It's all just crumble it all up and
rain changes everything, especially if it's going to rain consistently. Usually a little drops doesn't really affect the game, but receivers, like you have to, usually your hands are here. You have to bring your hands in tighter, tighten up your forearms and your hands because it's going to go through. So it makes catching really hard. The best catchers in the world struggle in the rain. And so it makes you one-dimensional. Both teams can run the football, but I think the Eagles, this favors the Eagles, would have messed up, torrential downpour.
You didn't like playing in the rain, did you?
No receiver liked playing in the rain. There isn't a receiver in the world because it's so hard. Those gloves are slick. There's really no solution. The ball is extremely slick. It's not like a high school football where the rain soaks into the ball and you still can catch it.
Right.
It's not the same thing at all. Every receiver hates playing in the rain.
Can you do that again? Can we zero in on Jason's fingers right there? Do that again.
Oh, you're talking about my messed up hands?
Now I realize why you caught everything, man. You have the longest, strongest fingers that I've ever seen.
You literally have to bring your hands in closer, where they're connected.
Otherwise it'll just go right through.
Yeah, you got to tighten your forearms and your hands, have a lot of tension, and pray for the best.
Well, the Eagles do have some strong-handed receivers. We'll get to that, but obviously the rain will threaten what you're saying. How about from a quarterback standpoint? They always work in practice on the whole dip the wet ball or the ball in the bucket, get it wet, but when it's coming down like this, is that sort of unpracticable?
No matter what a quarterback says, there's no way in a steady rain. I'm not talking about a drizzle. Steady rain. That there's no way quarterbacks like throwing the ball in that.
Never.
Way.
Wow.
Yeah. I saw Rich Gannon do it one time, play well in the rain when he was with the Raiders. They were playing at the old Giant Stadium, the old Meadowlands. It was so dink and dunk, and that's the way he could be.
Right.
But it was like 5 yards, 10 yards. All you could really do, because the other problem is you're worried about the ball. How's it going to come out of your hands? It's going to slip.
Correct.
There is one time, maybe once or twice, we played really well in the rain. And it was Michael Vick against Washington for about a quarter or so.
Yeah.
Down on the Monday Night Massacre there. About a quarter or so, it was consistent rain. And when it starts raining, you get teammates, hey, Jason, go in for me for a play.
Right. Really?
It happens, man, because guys don't catch well in the rain. They're like, Jason catches well in the rain.
Oh, my God.
So go in for me for a play. But Mike was spinning in the rain really well that game. Well, it was only for a quarter.
If that wasn't the ultimate salt to the wound for Washington that night, they were already getting their ass kicked before the rain.
He could roll out of bed and spin.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, there's a lot to discuss here. We are at Jack's Bar and Grill here at Rivers Casino and Sportsbook. Plenty of time to get down here, place your wagers, there's actually an early NFL game you can watch here on the big screen TV. They got leather recliners, and of course, here at Jack's Bar and Grill, a lot of great food and drink specials that you can take advantage of. Come watch the show if you'd like to see us in person. Although, if you don't want to see us in person, I would totally get it. for those at home, except Jay, if you want to see the hands, you want to see the
No
hands
hat
up
today.
front, you got to come down. Yeah, no hat. What's up with that?
Yeah, no hat. I didn't. Yeah.
You literally just came from Iowa straight here.
Yeah, I just came in. Right?
You got his sideline uniform on, I can see.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
All right, for those watching at home, please give us a share on whatever platform you're watching on, also a like, and if you leave a comment or your score prediction in the YouTube chat box, we will do our best to read it on air during the show. All right, fellas, you ready?
Do it, man.
Big show ahead? All right, we're going to dive into the X's and O's as we always do in a little bit. I always like to start the show with a big picture segment. Obviously, Jason, with the Eagles 3-0, Jaguars 2-1, you said something on the Q&A podcast this week on Inside the Birds platform that I kind of talked to after. I think I disagreed with you. You feel like Doug Pederson might get the cold shoulder today when he's announced. He'll get the rainy shoulder, I know that.
That was a bad take. That was a bad take.
Okay.
That was a bad take.
Right.
They should definitely cheer him on at the start of the game and then boo him for the rest of the game. You know, as an opponent. I maybe was a little tired, not thinking about it fully. But just thinking about Eagles fans in general, there's going to be some boo birds. It's not going to be, everyone.
Well, it's not like he asked to leave.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not the Scott Rowland effect,
Right.
Yeah.
He did not diss the
wanted it.
Philadelphia
Right.
fans.
Right.
And of course, he won the Super Bowl here.
Right.
He's going to be,
I mean,
this man will never have to buy a drink in this town ever.
Right.
Him and Foles. Yeah.
Hey, you could also make the argument that he was the one who benched Wentz to put in Jalen Hurts.
Right.
And I would think most Eagles fans right
good-
now would
good
view
way
that
to
as a
say it.
positive.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll view it as a positive. Yeah.
Who knew then?
Then right.
Who knew?
All right, so I think we're all expecting Dougie P to feel the love today when he gets announced. Will there be a video montage? Is that something
Oh,
that's
I don't
gonna
see
happen?
them doing that.
No?
I
No
I
video
don't.
tribute?
That would surprise me. It's interesting that you bring that up. I just don't know that they would do that.
It's more of an NBA thing than an NFL thing,
Yeah,
I think,
if
right?
he was retiring or something,
Yeah,
definitely. But
yeah.
no, if this is his last year, yes, but it's obviously not going to be so.
All right, a lot to talk about with Doug Pederson and his staff that he brings into Philadelphia today, many of which could have been Eagles coaches had things gone differently. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
Adam, I want to ask you, you made a stop into Jacksonville this summer during your annual training camp tour, and I'd like to know what you gathered from being there, just from Doug's overall presence as a head coach of that franchise coming out of the Urban Meyer experiment.
So I was fortunate enough to be right on the sidelines when these practices were at the Episcopal High School where Mark Brunell was a coach. He's now with the Lions.
Oh, okay.
And because they're having their practice facility built in terms of indoor. So I was around some business people, just gathering some opinions on the Urban Meyer experience, which we all know was terrible, and clearly getting a guy who's like the polar opposite of Doug Pederson, who brings in positivity, who could handle stress, who knows what it's like to coach and play in the National Football League, is exactly what they needed. And the funny thing was, they were talking to him a year before that about being their coordinator, potentially coming in there. It's just funny how that works out, and Seattle was also interested in him. So just bringing in positivity and a different personality, because Urban Meyer had full personnel control, had a pull over that franchise, which there was some residual effect. Being there in August, there were some people said they haven't forgotten all of it, and that experience was absolutely terrible. There's no question about it. But Doug has been phenomenal there, and the start that they've gotten off to, I don't think anyone saw.
Well, let's talk about that, Greg, in the big picture outlook. When you look at the Jaguars at 2-1, 2 straight games that they've won, do they come in here as, in your mind, a turned around team, a very worthy opponent here for the Eagles?
I think the answer is yes, but there's a lot to unpack there, which I'm sure we'll all talk about.
Right.
I think when a team has talent, and they have a lot of talent, by the way, but they're young and they're not used to winning, you never know in any given week when they might have a bad performance. So I don't want to sit here and say they're going to come in and it's going to be an unbelievable game, and you don't know, they could lose 30-10.
Sure.
But the point is this is a team that is building a lot of young talent, and the number one thing, I learned this from Dick Vermeil years ago. He said when you draft a quarterback number 1 in the draft, the whole focus of the entire organization down to the janitors has to be to make that guy a great player. Okay, that should be the number 1 focus, because if that guy does not become a great player, if he just becomes a guy, then your organization is static.
Right.
So, you know, the focus has to be making that guy, Trevor Lawrence in this case, a great player. Right. And I'm just going to start with that because, and we'll talk more about it, but just from a tape study perspective, there's a couple of things I noticed immediately week one, and they're incrementally getting better. Now, there'll be setbacks depending on a given game, but he's much quicker with his feet. His drop and his set is much quicker. His delivery is a little consistently more compact. Trevor Lawrence came into this league as a big, long-legged strider who struggled when there were people around him. And because of his body type, he would struggle in a quick rhythm pass game, which is a major part of Doug's offense. So you had to work with him from a mechanics and fundamental technique perspective, and you can see Doug, I'm sure, Jim Bob Cooter, you know, everybody who's working with him, they're doing a really, really good job because you can see the incremental progression.
Sure. And of course, defensively, we'll get into it. They've got some nice young building blocks.
And a certain approach, we'll get into that as we go.
A certain approach. All right, good stuff. All right, well, we've got a lot to break down today. First, we're going to start, as we always do, with the injury report. And for the first time this year, and probably first time in quite a while, going back to last year, the Eagles are the ones with more significant injuries than their opponent. The Eagles will have two key contributors out today, one being Boston Scott, who is out with a ribs injury, the other being Avonte Maddox, their starting slot corner, who's been playing fairly well.
Yes, he has.
He'll be out with an ankle injury. So those are the two most key contributors that will not play for the Eagles today. We'll get to that replacements in a second. But as far as everybody else, Adam, Miles Sanders, Devontae Smith, Landon Dickerson, guys who have been missing time here and there, they're all set and ready to go today.
Yeah, Devontae Smith, if you remember, he got hurt on the big catch downfield. He hit his lower back, but he's going to go. He only missed like one play, I think, or so. Landon Dickerson, this is the same injury he had in August. You saw him leave last week's game. Suopeta replaced him. Got to watch that. Sanders got hurt in the game with a hip injury. Now, again, when we talked about this on our show, I think that dropped on Friday, teams now are not listing as ribs. This says rib injury. Well, what's interesting is the Saints listed Alvin Kamara with a rib injury. He's now he missed his second game out of three.
Right.
So sometimes you wonder, is it really multiple ribs? But I digress. Williams got hurt in the game last week, came back quickly. Slay got hurt. He left the game, came back quickly. But Maddox got hurt in practice this week. That's the concern there.
Right.
And this is what happens, though. If your guy's got to run and you suffer an ankle injury in practice, you worry about that. And we'll get into who might replace him. But something to keep an eye on, though, with Landon Dickerson, because he left last week's game.
Yeah, Jay, I was going to ask you about that. When you see a guy he's been dealing with the foot injury since training camp now, and he's kind of been in and out of games, and he's been on the report with foot, you know, big guys and foot injury is usually not a great thing, and it seems like that's something to kind of monitor.
Yeah, anytime you have a foot injury for a big guy, the thing about it is that the Eagles, even if Landon Dickerson doesn't play, they have suitable backups, the guys that have played a lot of snaps, right? So
Jack Driscoll, Suopeta.
Right. There's a lot of guys that have played a lot of snaps and played pretty well. Now, I'm not saying that it's a downgrade. It definitely is a downgrade, but as an Eagle and as an Eagles fan, it's not something that I'm looking at against the Jaguars and saying this is going to be a make or break for our team this week, because this team has historically gone through so many injuries up front that this team is prepared for anything up front.
Sure. They have lost a few guys up front since the start of the season. We'll get into that in a second. The Jaguars, relatively healthy, nobody out. Questionable today is wide receiver Zay Jones, one of their offseason acquisitions, and another one of their offseason guys, cornerback Shaq Griffin. He's got a hip. Zay Jones with an ankle. Is that another case where practice, Adam?
He got hurt on Wednesday. They shut him down Thursday. He got treatment. We talked to a pretty good team source who said he surprised them that he was able to test it Friday, so they have a little bit more optimism. If he can't play, it'll be Tim Jones, who was a guy I was not familiar with.
Southern Miss.
Okay, the day I was there.
I watched him coming out.
He could run because
I liked him.
He made play after play downfield, and I said so to the personnel staff, I'm like, does this guy have a chance? He goes, yeah, we kind of discovered him, and he made the team come out of training camp. So
I watched his tape, and
so he could run a little bit.
I thought he could play in the NFL for sure.
Did you see him as an X or a Z? Because
I don't remember exactly, but I said to myself, this guy has a chance to play in the league. And those kinds of guys, it's all situational. It's where they go, how they're deployed. But I could easily see him being a number 3 and being a factor.
Could be
obviously with rain, maybe today's not the day.
Yeah.
But I mean, in general.
Last time I remember you speaking of somebody in practice who you didn't know, lighting it up. His name was Travis Fulgham, and he would go on to have 4 incredible games for the Philadelphia Eagles. So I don't know if Tim Scott's ready for that, but
Tim Jones, yes.
I'm sorry, Tim Jones. The Shaq Griffin, if he's not able to play for whatever reason, or if he comes out, Darius Williams?
Yeah, you might remember from the Rams.
Greg,
what do you think?
Darius Williams would play nickel. He'd play outside in the base, okay, and then in nickel he'd still go inside, and Herndon would play outside.
Trey Herndon, right?
He played last week.
And Herndon's been there for a while.
Yeah, so they've got some experience.
Yeah, they've got experienced players.
All right,
but Williams is a good player.
You remember him from the Rams a few years ago.
You were a big fan of that Rams secondary.
I really like him. I really like him. He's always near the ball.
Everybody might remember the one play where Wentz rolled left and he threw back on the play in the middle.
Yeah.
And Williams made the pick down by the goal line.
Yeah, in end zone.
So some of the Eagles' moves Saturday, might suggest what they're going to do as far as backups. First of all, with Boston Scott definitely out, it looks like Trey Sermon will be up and potentially getting carries today. So Jay, real quick, when you bring a new guy into your offense and he's not, what are the first 3 weeks like for Trey Sermon here?
It's a whirlwind.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard to learn this offense. He may be in a few plays, but it will only be to spell a guy. It will not be a consistent run package.
Maybe more fourth
like
quarter
that.
if they're up by a couple touchdowns.
It'll be like something that's universal around the league.
Like a straight zone run, or
it's going to be something like that. But when it comes to any third downs, any intricate plays that they have, he won't be in the game. So it's a whirlwind to try to catch up in this type of offense.
All right. Well, I think a lot of people, the Eagles fans, are kind of excited because of the Ohio State pedigree and the third-round pick, and obviously it was a terrible rookie year for him in San Francisco. But people are sort of interested to see what he's going to bring to the Eagles. More interesting is that the Eagles signed Britton Covey, the wide receiver from Utah, rookie free agent, to the 53-man roster. They were out of elevation, so he will most likely, I would assume, again, return punts today. And if I could go to a quote from the Q&A podcast about how every time Britton Covey gets hit returning punts, it looks like, quote, he's running into a brick wall, I believe is what you or Quentin Michaels said.
He has to gain weight. It looks like he's like the tackling dummy where there's no wind behind, or, no weight behind me, he's just going.
It looks ugly. It looks rough.
It looks like he's getting hurt every time. It's like a crash dummy, so that's it.
One thing to add, there are no more practice squad protections. Teams don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
That's why you're seeing guys being signed off left or right around the league. It's actually happened the last couple of weeks. There have been a ton of players sign off the team's practice squad. So they junked that before the season started. They decided no more protections.
So real quick, do you think, because now the Eagles have a full 53 with Dillard still on IR, when Dillard comes back, do they play the game where they just release Covey and then re-sign him to the practice squad if he clears waivers? I don't think they're afraid of him getting claimed off waivers. I could be wrong about that.
Well, then who would be the punt returner? Scott?
It's a good question. I don't. That's a. Well, would you be out of
challenge?
You're still out of elevations, even if you waive him and bring him back.
I don't think they want to put Devonta Smith back there.
No. They did it once last week.
I know.
I don't think they want to
make him the punt returner. I wouldn't. I don't know how you feel.
This is what I say. Usually, your best athlete is dynamic at punt return.
Right.
Whether
Sean.
it be Westbrook, Deshaun, and Antonio Brown. It all depends. I think those guys can do it. It's just how much do you want to expose them? But in situations, they can be, and they're usually good enough. They're usually better athletes than the special team guys.
Well, I imagine the coaches would tell you that the best athlete on the team who they're less afraid of getting injured would be Quez Watkins, but we've seen him return
He's not
kicks.
He's not a punt returner.
And kickoff.
That's my point was he is a very good athlete, but it hasn't translated to the return
At
game.
this point, what have we gotten from the punt returner in 5 years?
That's a great point.
So with that being said, we need a guy
Bunch
that
of
just
fair
can
catches.
catch the ball.
Yeah, that's all.
Because we're not asking him to contribute much anyway.
Right.
Yeah, that to me, guys, I know this is a minor point, but people are saying, okay, what are the Eagles' weaknesses? Clearly the return game, which has not been good for years. Greg Ward, he could secure it, but he'd fair catch it most of the time.
Right.
That's something they have to figure out next offseason, because if you want to be a championship team, you'd like to be able to feel like, okay, this guy could get us 8 to 10 yards, which they think Covey can do. Mm-hmm. He just has to get back to doing that.
Well, we'll see if Covey can give him a little boost in the return game today. Bigger news maybe that they elevated Andre Chachere, a hybrid defensive back, has played safety, has played nickel. He's been elevated from the practice squad. Avonte Maddox is obviously out. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson would normally be someone you would think who would slide into that spot, but I don't know that the coaches want to change what they've done with him. So I would look for a Josiah Scott today, who's a special teamer, to kind of occupy that nickel role, and then Chachere goes and is a special teamer today.
And I think the reason that they're likely to do that and not move Gardner-Johnson is because I think over the last couple of weeks, we've seen with the structure of this defense, which we can get into more, because it's kind of built on a quarter structure and it involves a lot of matching, carrying, passing on. That takes a lot of work and communication, and I don't think a new player like Gardner-Johnson, even though he's a smart player, I don't think they want to move him and disrupt that flow that's clearly developed over the last couple of weeks.
Do you think on top of that, if you moved him,
so instead of making two players who are different, you just have one player who's different.
Right. Makes sense.
Right, almost like what they do with the offensive line.
Makes sense to you?
No, that makes sense to me. Structurally, that makes sense. The best fit would be Gardner-Johnson and Kayvon Wallace. I don't think that, but again, you don't want to take Gardner-Johnson away from what he's doing. He's getting better back there. He's definitely getting better. He's still got a few balls over his head that were dropped and some stuff last week too. I always got my eye on him from the first game.
But I remember he took a bad angle.
He took a few bad angles over the last few weeks. You know, one he paid for, one he didn't. But ultimately, you want him to continue to progress in that situation. So just Josiah Scott may be the answer. But overall, do I think that Gardner-Johnson is the best nickel on our team?
He could well be.
Of course, I would probably.
I think,
Maddox,
And by the way, I think there's no easy answer to that.
Right.
You know, so, you know, that becomes then the coaching staff sitting up at night after practice when it's 11 o'clock and they're having their brews, deciding what they want to do. You know, and it's not a mathematical equation. There's no easy answer. You know, so it just depends on, and we'll find out today, obviously.
It all depends on how much Josiah Scott knows, right?
Right.
That's right. That's all he should know.
Because there's a lot of communication involved. You know, because they're playing a lot of that Vic Fangio structure now, which is a lot of communication.
Yes.
And there's a lot of adjustments, And the question is, do you want two people to have to make major adjustments or theoretically one person to make a major?
And a big thing with Josiah Scott is, remember, he moved from slot corner. He was technically the backup slot last year, but he didn't really play.
Right.
But he moved to safety this summer, and that gave him, this is before they made the trade for Gardner-Johnson, and he really helped them. He could also play in special teams. He's good with that. So this has been a pretty good find for him, and I could certainly see it happening today.
Yeah, and by the way, this is his former team. Josiah Scott will face the Jacksonville Jaguars, who picked him in the 4th round. All right, I'm not sure how many people expected that the Jaguars and Eagles would combine to have 5 wins by the end of week 3, but here we are. The Jags have already come 1 win shy of matching all of last year's total of 3 wins. The Eagles, of course, are off to their first 3-0 start since, anyone?
2017?
2016.
2017, right? They lost to Kansas City.
Right.
That's right.
2016, they started off 3-0 under the first year of head coach
Doug Pederson.
It all comes full circle, gentlemen.
And
it all comes full circle.
What was the losing streak? What did they lose like?
They went through some peaks and valleys that year.
They had a lot in 16.
Like 4 or 5.
In 2017, they lost to KC week 2 and then won like 10 or 11 in a row.
And then, that really set the
Chris
stage.
Jones killed, what is it, Vitae?
Yeah.
I remember that.
Now, the quarterbacks always take center stage. We've got Trevor Lawrence versus Jalen Hurts, but really these two teams are also defined by their emerging defenses. And obviously, what you saw last week in the Eagles game, worthy of some discussion there, as the Eagles erupt for 9 sacks against Carson Wentz. We will get to how those sacks came about and developed, because I think there's a lot of back-end stuff that led to that. But
some.
But in some cases, there's just a guy beats a guy, and you saw that a lot last Sunday. Fletcher Cox. I mean, the total stats here are pretty staggering. That's 9 sacks, 17 quarterback hits, 5 of them alone from Brandon Graham, 9 tackles for a loss, a fumble recovery, and 4 pass breakups. By the way, the 9 sacks is the most by an NFL team this year. And now the Eagles are 13 overall, which is number 2 in the NFL, right behind the Dallas Cowboys. So, Greg, when you watched that game and dissected it and picked it apart, what stood out to you from a line standpoint there, why the Eagles were up on Carson Wentz?
First of all, there's a lot that goes into this. The large majority were just one-on-ones. Yeah. But you can dictate one-on-ones by your fronts. You know, and a lot of people don't realize that. They just see a one-on-one and they go, he beats him one-on-one.
Right.
But you can dictate that. That's one reason, and the Eagles are in the forefront of that a lot of teams now are lining up in 5-man fronts. Because 5-man fronts, more often than not, nothing's 100%, but more often than not, dictate one-on-one protection.
Right.
And
5
so
offensive linemen, 5 pass rushers.
Right. So you can dictate, particularly on the inside, who you want to attack. You know, the outside's the outside for the most part. But on the inside, you can dictate who you want to attack. Do you want to attack the guards? Do you want to attack the center? So by the nature of your fronts, and more teams, and I had a conversation with an O-line coach about this, one reason you're seeing a lot more 5-man fronts is because it dictates protection.
Sure.
And that's the goal of defenses, is they want to know what the protection is.
account for it.
Then they can break down the protection either schematically or with individuals in one-on-one situations.
Is it safe to say with 9 sacks that there was more than just one guy on Washington's offensive line that struggled? Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean,
because they were on their second string center.
Right. But the majority, I mean, I think maybe all 9. I think were there any that were not one-on-ones? I don't think so. There was one blitz. There was one blitz.
Right.
But it all ended up being one. In other words, what I'm saying, it wasn't the scheme where, let's say, somebody got free or somebody got on a back. They were beating offensive linemen.
Right.
And that means that they were pretty much better.
Right.
Like, and that's what it is. They took advantage of some older players. We talked about it in the pregame before.
Norwell
with Trey Turner,
yep.
Norwell, and then the left tackle had a really hard game, trying to, get guys off. What was it, Charles Leno?
Yeah, he
had a rough game.
He had a really rough game, So there was some advantage that they had, with that offensive line, and they took full advantage of it.
Right.
Brandon Graham played
and Adam made that point last week when we did the game that Norwell and Turner were no longer, really good guards.
No, in fact, Turner, quite frankly, I'm surprised he's still playing.
Yeah.
Based on what I'd heard, Greg, you guys know this. When someone tells you,
I know this as well, but I mean, you made the point.
No,
last
but
week.
here's the point.
I want to give you credit for
No,
making
I
the
appreciate
point.
it, but I want to explain something. No, I want to explain to you what people saw.
Yeah.
When a lineman is on his back, a lot, that means he's on the ground. That means you're balanced. You're getting pushed off. You're not doing your job well enough, and that's what Turner's tape showed for a couple of years.
Yep.
That's why he's been on 5 teams.
Correct.
Norwell was the highest paid guard in NFL history at one point.
He had a year or two in Carolina where he was really, really good.
Yep.
But he was he undrafted coming into the league, or he was either that or a late round pick?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, they're no longer those kinds of
No,
players.
and when you go up against Washington now, to me, and Greg was talking about this, I don't think you have to blitz a lot. You know you can win one-on-one against those
and
guys.
especially when you start off with 3 sacks in a row, 2 to end one series and 1 to start the next series, you're not thinking that we really have to blitz.
Eagles should have had 5 sacks. Carson Wentz holds the ball way too long.
Well, he holds the ball too long.
Yeah.
It's
also.
just that, like, he had outlets. He had multiple outlets.
Yeah.
Maybe a guy get a little hit, but not too hard.
Yeah. Right.
But he had multiple outlets,
Right.
and he just wants to make the big play.
And
He
that's,
just does.
and that's always been an issue with Carson Wentz. And if you can protect him well, that doesn't show up. But
Yes.
if the pocket starts to get squeezed, it shows up.
Yeah.
This is how a team kind of implodes, because there's no offensive lineman that wants to see 9 sacks total, especially when the league is all, like you're taking guys' job away.
Right.
You're taking their jobs away if you don't get rid of the football. And you 9 sacks, everyone in the league is like, dude, we're coming after this guy because this offensive line sucks.
Right.
Not knowing that some of these sacks are just on the quarterback. And even when he turned the ball over the most in in the league when he was with the Eagles, most of those sacks were on Carson Wentz.
Correct.
He doesn't get the ball out of his
And they got Dallas today. They're pretty good rushing the quarterback.
And
but anyway,
Disaster. By the way, and they're also on their 3rd string center today.
Right,
believe,
I know.
because The second string guy got hurt.
Nick Martin, yeah.
Yeah.
Question for Jason: When you're in a game and your quarterback's getting hit repeatedly, are you able to hear these talks with the offensive line coach? Like, what are these talks like?
No, it depends on what guy you have. If you freaking had Trey Thomas is a true Donovan out. Like, hey, man, get the ball out of your hands.
Right.
3-step drop. Get it out. Like, why are you taking 5 steps? Like, those, because that's their reputation.
Yeah.
That's their work, their pride. And those guys have big pride. They're the best in the league. And so when the quarterback isn't doing their job, of course you're going to hear the offensive line say something.
Adam, we talked about Fletcher Cox last week, and coming off that week 1 where he's sort of non-existent and they had a rough game on defense, and you were told by a personnel source something to the effect of Let's see how this guy responds over the next few weeks. Well, he got a really big game against Washington.
I was like, we talked about this after the Week 1 game against Detroit, where his energy wasn't there. They moved him off the ball. When do you ever hear that about Fletcher Cox? And this guy said to me, he goes,
right.
I know Philly pretty well. I'm going to see how much he cares. Apparently, I guess he cares because he had better energy the last 2 weeks, and the numbers show it, the pressure numbers. See, I wonder, because when Fletcher turns it on, even in his 30s, still could look like a dominant player. Mm-hmm. So you do wonder, if you extrapolate this a little bit, if he has a consistent year. I think we all assumed he wouldn't be back because of Jordan Davis. Should we assume that?
That's a great question. That's a question for a little bit, maybe in November.
Right. Yeah, that's a question for later.
But if he plays well, that could be a question.
The thing is, he shows up and disappears a little bit too much, and usually that's a sign. Greg could probably tell you this. It's a sign of age.
Yep.
Because that's what it is when you get older. It's either you get hurt and/or you just can't sustain a level of play that you're used to.
Because I don't think, Jay, you could speak to this as a player. I don't think a guy consciously says, maybe I'm wrong, you tell me, a guy consciously says, on this play, I'm not really going to try hard.
But the tape, shows
do they say that in their mind?
No one.
It's more of like a motivation.
No one says that in your mind,
Right.
but there's a couple of different factors.
Right.
Usually when
That's
you
why
get,
I'm asking you.
When you get a guy like Fletcher Cox that's really had the keys to the organization for so long, he's able to get away with things that maybe he wouldn't in another place.
Right.
So if he doesn't want to practice Wednesday and Thursday, and he's feeling like he can turn it on, it usually doesn't happen that way. You need all of those practices in order
Right.
to stay revved up for Sundays.
Right, but that's different than like in the middle of the game saying, okay, on this play I'm not going to
No,
try.
he's never saying
right,
that.
He's never
it's just
saying that.
It's just that maybe a guy like him, either he's getting older and/or he's so comfortable here that he doesn't feel like he has to play at that level all the time.
Right.
Guys, it's the intensity. I've been told for years with Cox. Some games he doesn't have it play to play for whatever reason. We can't get into the guy's head.
Right, you can't, right.
But the tape shows, okay, why was he not dominant? He could be literally unblockable because he's, as Jim Washburn used to say, he's country strong.
Right.
You don't find guys like this.
No.
Guys,
Well, that's why it was a
you
high
know.
pick and
Yeah.
it's a good career. But I think a lot of, just as an aside before we move on, the Cox conversation, we'll talk more about that later in the year, but I think much of that will depend on the development of Jordan Davis. Because Jordan Davis, at some point, being the 13th pick in a draft, is going to have to play on third down.
Right.
And, it's early in his career, and he's played, for the most part, pretty well in the role that he's been asked to play.
Yes.
But that's not, the role he's in now is not the reason they drafted him 13th.
Correct.
So much will depend on his development.
I know. Let's also remember Javon Hargrave is also in the final year
Right.
of his deal, too. A lot of big decisions on the D-line interior coming up.
Sound like we're drafting the defensive tackle next year.
That's right.
Probably.
At ends.
Or an end, yeah. So lost maybe in the shuffle of all those sacks and front four pressure is what was going on the back end to enable that and assist it, I should say. So let's talk about Jonathan Gannon's matchup zone concepts and some of the things, because I'm watching the tape, Greg, and I could literally hear your voice in some of those third down coverages of match, carry, deliver. You can see it when you watch it.
Yeah.
That's
the Vic Fangio principle,
Right.
which you see all around the league now. Some teams execute it better than others, and that takes a lot of work, which goes back to our conversation about whether you want to change two positions or just one position.
Right.
But that's essentially what teams play. A lot of teams play now because it has elements of zone and it has elements of man. And the other really interesting thing about it is most of the, and nothing's 100% by the way, just want to make that clear there. No one plays it on every snap. But is very often teams start in a quarters look, 4 across. And you can go anywhere from a quarters look initially. So now you're asking the quarterback, even the really smart ones, they have to decipher and isolate after the ball snap, not before the ball snap.
Right.
And that's what you're trying to do, because you're trying to tie in your coverage with your pass rush.
Right.
That's what pass defense is.
Sure.
You're trying to tie in both. Now, in this particular scheme, the coverage is a big factor in helping your pass rush. If you're going to, let's say, play cover 2, the pass rush becomes the bigger factor as opposed to the coverage.
Right. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of voids in cover 2 and your pass rush has to get there.
Right.
But when you play more of this quarters look with a number of different ways to go, you're hoping that the quarterback has to take that extra beat and a half, and then your pass rush gets there.
Jason, as a wide receiver, can you explain when you're running a route against that kind of a defense, the match, carry, deliver prompts? Because Carl Stevenson, our Patreon subscriber, and some others have asked for a little bit more of a vivid picture of what that looks like from your vantage point.
So this particular week, they had a few wrinkles even in their zone. It was a man zone kind of a model that they hadn't shown.
Right.
And if I'm thinking of the type of thing that you're talking about, I'll explain this defense, right? So basically, this past week, what confused Carson on maybe 3 or 4 straight third downs, right? The inside guys were locked, right? The slot was locked. The safety was locked, and if the guy went vertical or horizontal, that guy was there.
Yeah, right.
However, the 2 outside guys had rules. If my number 1 goes vertical, I stay on him. But if he goes horizontal, I let him go to a guy that's in that zone, a linebacker or the extra safety that was there, right? And so it was a different look for the Eagles, but that's what it was. It's matchup, but it's man.
Man outside, zone inside.
It's man. If everyone goes vertical, it's man to man.
Right.
If a guy started going a shallow cross, a crosser, one of the safeties is going to pick him up when he crosses.
Sure.
Right. So now it leaves. So what happens is this. You know who was really great at this was the Ravens and Ed Reed. Because if once the guy crosses, Ed Reed will take him, and now that corner has to replace. And those are the things. So if the guy crosses, the corner plays safety now.
Right.
So it was a little confusing, but there's a lot of principles to it, depending on the defense.
Yeah. To your point, you could see on a couple of those like Bradbury on a crossing route is sticking with his guy until they get to the middle of the field where that's when it's passed off to TJ, and then he runs right back to get the outlet in the flat or whoever is on that side.
And another main principle of this defense, which is not quarters based, is when they do play with a single high safety, they play, I believe they call it cover 9, but it's essentially 3 match.
Okay.
So you're matching the slot, because a lot of times in cover 3, in cover 3, if your underneath defenders are not going to run with seams, the seams become available because a post safety can't play both seams.
Right.
You can't cover that kind of space, and good quarterbacks can manipulate the post safety.
Yeah.
So what a lot of teams play, and in many ways, a lot of people think it's Nick Saban who made this famous with his, lids, whatever he calls it, but it's 3 match. So what you do is you're matching the inside receivers. Let's say if it's 2 by 2, so you're not allowing them just to run the seams unimpeded.
Right. Yeah. Right. You said you hated, by the way, as a receiver going up against those kind of coverages.
Yeah, because they were confused and they broke principles, right? So historically, when you teach a cover 3 defense, you think that the 2 corners have a third of they have a third and the safety has a third, right? And then the guys that are coming down, they have the flat. Now there's no flat defender, and the guy that's in the slot is just running the field with you. So it breaks principles, especially if you have, and now that guy can basically press you, and it looks like man.
Right.
So it really throws off your version of cover 3.
So not only does it impact the quarterback, it impacts receivers.
Right.
So that's the whole point.
Right.
And by the way, I know we went through all this last year talking about Gannon, and and we're not going back to last year, but the point is that this stuff takes a lot of time. This is where Gannon wanted to get to. Now, I'm not saying that from now on the Eagles defense will be dominant and they'll never have a bad game. There's good offensive coordinators in this league too.
Right.
But the point is, this is sort of a trend in the league now. A lot of teams are playing this because it takes away seams and it cuts down on explosive plays, in theory.
By the way, so I was just doing a background on why scoring is down. It's actually down a lot, almost a touchdown this year.
Yeah.
Wow.
More teams are playing more zone. A lot of teams are playing 2 high safeties.
Yep.
And to Greg's point, their zone drops are taking away those seams, so the tight end numbers are actually down this season.
Yeah, the seams are not available.
No.
When you play 2 shell, the seams are not available.
So now the question is, how are teams going to start defeating that?
Well,
coaches are smart.
Everything is cyclical.
Right.
I mean, believe me, there's ways to attack even in the pass game, but everything becomes cyclical.
It's Marty Morningweg.
I was going to say, you sound like Marty Morningweg over there. Although he used to
his
say
line.
cyclic.
Cyclic, yeah.
But it's true.
Yeah, it is. They'll figure it out.
Yeah,
it's true.
Of course.
Absolutely. Adam, I know you talked to some league sources who watch a tape of what Jonathan Gannon is doing, and they feel that the 4-man rush with those back-end concepts is more what he probably wants to be known as than somebody who's blitzing a lot.
Yeah, I mean, they're still their blitz numbers are up from last year.
Well, they're always
a
compared
bit
to last year.
Right, but someone who's close to him told me that the way he's running, Greg just kind of talked about this. This is what he wants. He believes he can win with disguised pre-snap and post-snap movement.
Right.
He didn't do a lot of it last year because I don't think he felt they could handle it. But they sure can now, and they're doing that, Greg.
Yeah, well, I think that's one reason they traded for Gardner Johnson, because he's a smart player who has a lot of experience, by the way, in a Dennis Allen defense that does a lot of disguise and late movement.
There you go.
So he's used to playing that way. Sure. This is not new to him.
And you got a lot of you got Bradbury that's been in this league.
Yeah.
You know, you got a bunch of veterans, and I'm sure when you have a guy that's as vocal as Darius Slay and Bradbury and these guys and Gardner Johnson, they're going to go to the defense coordinator and say, hey, let's play this.
Right.
You know, because this can, and they'll give a very educated reason of why they should play, and I'm sure that convinces, because that will convince our offense coordinator at times. We say, hey Marty, we got to get to this play because they're doing this, this, and this, and before you know it, fourth quarter comes, they're running it.
I actually think they've got 4, and let's put Maddox in it because I think he's like this too. I think they got 5 really savvy guys in their nickel coverage.
Yeah.
And I think when you have guys like that, you can do a lot of things and feel good about doing them.
Because
they can handle them.
Right, because that's what Gannon said before the season started about, maybe it was either right before or right after, where he talked about how he has more trust. Well, we know what happened last year, and I know Steven Nelson was a part of this. They just didn't have the depth at corner,
right?
And he never really felt he could play the matchup zone. We were told last summer this is what he's doing now is what he wanted to do. Greg, you could attest to how much they did it last year.
Yeah.
But I don't think he was comfortable doing it. Now he sure is.
Comfortable doing it.
And with reason, by the way. I mean, I know we knocked him.
So we took an approach that we sat here and criticized, and everybody criticized, where he said, you know what, I'm just not going to give up big plays.
Right.
And so I know quarterbacks completed 80%. We had all these conversations, and we're not saying that's right or wrong. But the point is, he made a calculated decision.
Sure.
I'm not going to give up big plays.
And that's what we're at. All right. We are going to talk about the guy who's responsible today for trying to foil that Eagles defense. He comes home. His name is Doug Pederson. First, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our friends at Sky Motor Cars, including the voice of the Eagles, Mr. Merrill Reese.
Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
All right, we thank our friends at Sky Motor Cars. If you go out and see them in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them Adam and Jeff sent you. You will get a great deal. You can also visit them at SkyMotorCars.com.
Just can I make one more just before we move on?
No. Nope.
Yeah. Okay.
Just got it.
I've talked to a lot of defensive guys in the league, and one of the things they always talk about is even the guys that do a lot of things, because there's 10 versions of cover 3, there's 10 versions of cover 4. I mean, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of adjustments that are built in. But the way coaches talk about it, if you're a defensive coach, they talk about it as we want to make it as simple as we can for us and as confusing as possible for the offense.
Right.
So
I've heard Gannon even talk about the simplifying of the concepts.
I had a great conversation with Dennis Allen about that this summer when I was down in New Orleans. And that's what they try to do. That's sort of the goal. Now, that takes time to teach your defense.
Right.
Because there's a lot of things, but you're trying to teach it in a way that it's all concept-based so they understand the concepts first.
Gotcha.
When you're dealing with concepts in defense, in that if you have cover 4, you have cover 2, you have cover 3. Whenever you're in these coverages, you want multiple change-ups to those coverages, right? So you need a carry option. You need a standard flat option. You need in cover 4, if number 1 is going vertical, he stays with them, or the safety picks him up, like they got confused with a couple, with the Vikings got confused with.
They went cover 4 to that side.
Right. But there's different rules that are within these. You need all of these things to throw off an offense, because if you get stuck in one, we're going to be able to figure it out. But if you start to change those things up, you start throwing change-ups and fastballs and sinkers, it's tough to time up.
And especially for young quarterbacks, because they're not used coming from college. They're not seeing defenses in college that have 10 versions of cover 3.
Right.
They're not used to that.
Right.
So they might come to the line of scrimmage in their first year or two in the league and see what clearly looks like a cover 3 structure and think, oh, this is your basic cover 3, which has basic cover 3 has clear rules.
Sure.
But in the NFL, there's not just basic cover 3.
Right.
There's 10 versions of cover 3.
And that's what the Steelers made. The Steelers made their money with Dick LeBeau with 3 or 4 defenses, but there were so many alternatives within that defense.
Different looks within the same concept.
But when they lined up, it was the same thing.
Right.
But they can blitz from anywhere, and the guys on the back end can change roles and change responsibility based on the team that they were playing.
Sure.
So that reminded me because I was watching Iowa football, and they have the same defense when I played. I'm like, the best defenses ever usually do the same things over and over.
Dick LeBeau is a Hall of Famer, no doubt. I mean, he's one of the best. So let's, as the Eagles get ready to welcome back Doug Pederson today, and he brings in a team who's outscored his opponents, I think 62-10 over the last 2 weeks, including 38-10 win last week. What can, forget personnel for a second, from a concept of what the Jaguars do offensively, what can they do to better attack what the Eagles have been doing with this zone that Washington did not or could not do?
Well, they're not going to. Well, let's say something. Trevor Lawrence gets the ball out in 2.3 seconds. He's not holding it. It's not an option with Doug Pederson. The way that he's coaching Trevor Lawrence right now is that they have a very good RPO game where he's reading and throwing the backside Omaha or slant or something like that on every run. So at times you're looking at it like, dude, is this a run play or pass play?
Right.
But he's getting the ball out of his hands pretty quickly, and I think that's going to just eliminate some rushing elements for the Eagles in general, just with the run pass option from the quarterback. And I don't know if Greg sees it that way, but I think that they're getting the ball out of the hand. They always have a guy open.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so what we're told is Jim Bob Cooter and Mike McCoy, the quarterback's coach, this is what they came in with, particularly Jim Bob Cooter. They looked at last year's tape and they said, okay, here's what we need to do. Reduce his drops, get it out quickly. It'll help our offensive line, which it has
Just
done.
what I said when we started talking.
Yeah, it's
speeding them up.
This helps everybody. It's not just the quarterback.
Of course.
It's their offensive line, which people were killing for years. Not good enough. Why do they bring back Cam Robinson? Why do they bring back the guards and center? Brandon Leonard's no longer there. Their center retired. But it helps everybody out. And Jason brought up Wentz last week. If they just would have reduced Wentz's drops from 7 to 5 to 3, maybe we would have had a different result. Coaching, like sometimes you got to say it's not working. It may work the other weeks, but it's not working. They came in with a plan here in Jacksonville. This is the way we're going to win with this guy, because last year's scheme did not work for Trevor Lawrence at all.
Well, you know, the other thing too, which I think you'll see,
okay,
because they've done this the first 2 weeks, is you're going to see a lot of motion. Now, a lot of times if you're in a quarters look, you don't have to respond to motion because with 4 across, it doesn't matter. The passing strength doesn't matter. The same as if you're playing single high.
Sure.
So, but I think Kirk has been a big motion guy for them. They've even used Zay Jones, if he goes, as a big motion guy. So I think they'll see early on, Doug will want to see how the Eagles respond to that.
Right.
Especially with a new player in the secondary.
So I agree with you. I disagree a little bit. Just when
You're allowed to.
So now.
Thank you.
When you come to a full cross,
prefer
it depends on where the guy's motioning from. If he's motioning from one side and now he's 3, that makes a big difference. Not for the coverage on the back end, but for who's going to pick him up from the second tier, because now he turns into the responsibility of the second tier guys, right? So it all depends. And yes, Doug comes from that Andy tree where shifts and motions are huge.
Right.
And they get in personnels that are exotic, like they were in stallion personnel, 3 receivers and 2 running backs. I don't consider Agnew as a receiver, but he's like a running back style. And you have Robinson and Agnew in there. So you start to get into those things like shifts, motions, and personnel. He definitely is the master at those things.
It's funny. I don't think we disagree based on what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly. What I think it does is it changes responsibilities for back-end guys. So in other words, if it's a 2-by-2 set, there's certain responsibilities for the safeties if you're quarters. If it becomes 3-by-1, that backside safety now has a different responsibility, but he doesn't have to change where he's lined up.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, we're saying, yes.
So we're saying the same.
Yes.
Yeah. It just changes responsibilities within the coverage.
Sure. And so the offense will try to motion guys to get different
to see how they
formations
react,
to get a tell out of the defense.
They're with the mentality. It's the mentality from Bill Walsh is always to gain a half a man. You motion for multiple reasons, but to gain a half a man, recognize if it's man or zone, and also free up a guy with releases. Right. So those are reasons that you motion, and they are doing a great job of gaining a half a man when they motion, because they're getting in there and they're getting the ball out to the flat, you know, out route, something like that very quick, and it happened because of motion.
Sure. All right, well, you mentioned the coaching and the difference with Doug Pederson compared to Urban Meyer.
Sure.
And I think it's very important to note today that when Doug Pederson comes in, he brings with him some very familiar names, including his offensive coordinator, Press Taylor, assistant quarterbacks coach Andrew Briner, of course his defensive coordinator Mike Caldwell, who used to be a linebacker for the Eagles, Zeke, right?
We got to talk about their defense.
Oh, we will.
We will.
Oh,
We'll get into that.
That's in there.
Also, Rory Segrist, line coach, and Bill Shuey. So, Adam, we know
Bill
that.
Shuey, my buddy.
Yeah, Westchester University.
I love Bill.
Yeah.
We also know, Adam, that this coaching staff was a bone of contention between Doug Pederson and the owner when it came to the end of the 2020 season.
Correct.
And for the first time as an Eagles coach, then Eagles coach until about the next day, Doug drew a line in the sand and said, no, these are my coaches who I want. And then we all know what happened. He's no longer the Eagles coach after that. So I have to think that today.
And Lee.
Well, Jim Bob Cooter was here too for a year.
Last year.
He was,
Yeah.
but not with Doug.
Right.
So
That's right.
The point I'm making is, and we had a nice conversation for our Patreon subscribers with John DiFilippo, a great hour-long interview on our Patreon platform. And John said, this is not just a game, another game for Doug Pederson. And you know that he would like to come in here with his coaching staff already at 2-1 and show what he can get done today.
Yeah, and I know some people said it's a non-conference game, but just talking to coaches over the years, this means something to him. And his players, by the way, when they were interviewed this week, they said they want to win it for him because of what it means to him. So they obviously know.
Right.
Yeah, there's no question. I don't know, Jason, if you've been around situations like this.
Jay, you were there in 2020. You know.
You were there. That's right. You were an assistant on Doug. What do you think it means to him?
No, he definitely wants to win, because everyone thought that Doug would be back.
Right.
It was out of the blue that he was let go. I know the coaching staff there thought they were coming back.
Unless you were inside the birds.
So yeah, unless you're inside the birds, right? So what that means is that I'm pretty sure he stood on the table for some guys, and I know coaches that have literally, told me that and he wanted that control. So I'm sure that Doug wants to win one, to let him know that my coaching staff was, pretty legit.
Sure. Remember, at the end of the 2019 season or 18 season,
With
Doug
Carson.
said his coaching staff was coming back, and then a few days later, Mike Rowe was not back, and his wide receivers coach, I think at that time was Carson Walsh, was not
the
back
guy
either.
from college.
He's now with the Browns.
Right, and we know that was not Doug Pederson's ultimate decision there. So,
Came
like
from
I
upstairs.
said,
Yes.
he drew a line in the sand and said, it's them or me. And Jeffrey Lurie said, well, it's neither of any. It's none of you
You don't
guys.
think Doug and Jeffrey had dinner last night? Probably not.
I don't know if it's like bad blood, but I think Doug was definitely a defender
I
of
know
his
he's
way.
hurt.
Yeah.
He had to be hurt.
Of course.
Yeah, that had that.
Oh, one thing, Tim Houck was supposed to join Doug's staff. It didn't work out. So that would have been another guy that was from his Super Bowl winning staff.
Yeah. My favorite part of the Jeffrey Lurie press conference to announce that Doug Pederson was no longer head coach was when he said that Doug Pederson did not deserve to get fired. In the press conference to announce his
That was
fire.
weird.
Right,
I do remember
It
that.
was an odd time to be covering the Eagles
right.
at that point. So let's get back to Trevor Lawrence. Adam, you guys all mentioned first overall pick. Go ahead.
Can I say
No,
something to
definitely.
that?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think, and this is just over my time as a player and player-coach relationship ownership.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we worry about personality types. Like Carson Walsh was very demonstrative, and he demanded a bunch, right? And a lot of people couldn't handle that. I think we have to learn how to deal with different personality types, because a lot of these things can be resolved. We see that they're good coaches,
Right.
right?
So you mean the
Jaguars-
players? You said the players need to respond better?
No.
Or
Just
what do you mean?
as an organization,
organization.
because people get fired sometimes
Yeah.
in organization because they don't like their personality.
Yeah,
Not
it's
because
true.
they can't coach.
Well,
extra.
let me tell you,
True.
Jay, you're absolutely right about
know.
that. You've seen it, and I think this past offseason, from a front office perspective, you saw a lot of guys ushered out and a lot of new people in, and the front office is almost completely new.
Completely new. Yeah.
And when Adam and I did our reporting on it, personality types meshing, people understanding each other, the ability to have healthy debate is something that would come back to us as saying we're not sure the environment is always right for that. So I think that you make a really good point.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Do we have a visitor? Looks like we have a guest here.
Wearing an A.J. Brown jersey. Hi. How are you?
How you doing?
Wow.
Good,
How are you?
good. Welcome to live TV.
What's
your name?
I'm Laura.
All right,
Laura. Thank you.
Laura.
Nice
We
to meet
appreciate
you.
it. Thank you.
This is Laura from Rivers
Oh,
Casino.
why she's wearing a Wentz jersey. You need to cover that up. Put Brown on there, yeah.
All right, well, thanks for bringing the
Love
drinks.
Eagles.
There you
Thank
go.
you.
All right, we appreciate the delivery from Rivers Casino and Sportsbook. We were on the subject real quick of Trevor Lawrence as we wrap up the first hour here. I just wanted to go through some of the improvement here. I mean, he's not high in the passing yards. It's not been a downfield offense yet, but 6 passing touchdowns, just 1 interception in 111 attempts, and he's completing 70% of his passes with a 103.1 pass rating. It sounds like Doug has him playing
Great in the
efficiently.
red zone, too.
And great in the red zone. By the way, Washington was 5 for 5 in the red zone before they dealt with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Right.
But it sounds like this is a very efficient quarterback right now. Is that maybe the best way to
I think
describe
that's what they're trying to do.
Right.
I mean, schematically and structurally, that's the way they're playing. My guess is they're trying to build. In some ways, and I've been around Trevor Lawrence, and he's a great, great kid who's extremely coachable, by the way.
That
But
is
you've probably
important.
heard the same thing.
Yes, and that's
So-
why he's taken everything they've
Right.
asked him to do. Yeah.
So I think what they're trying to do, Jeff, is build. In other words, let's start this way, then we work toward the deeper stuff, but let's sustain offense, let's build an offense. We're not just playing to make an individual play, we're trying to build an offense. Now, just keep one thing in mind, and I think it shows up on tape, and I've talked to offensive coaches. Trevor Lawrence got billed, of course, after his first year at Clemson as generational, the greatest thing. Trevor Lawrence is gifted, but he's not a special big arm power thrower. He's a good thrower. He's not one of those, oh my God, watch him throw a football.
Josh Allen.
He's not Josh Allen.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, he's a good thrower, but sometimes his deeper throws do lose a little energy on the back end. Everybody knows this. What I just told you was not news. It might be news to people listening because of the way he was built up, which was not his fault.
Right.
But this is what he is. He's actually going to work well because now his footwork is getting better. He'll work well in this kind of pass game, and then the deeper shots would become calculated.
Sure.
But he's not just an automatic, let's drive it down the field thrower.
I agree with you. With these 3 games, I saw a lot out of Trevor Lawrence when it comes to him being patient.
Yep.
When it comes to touch, he has that's one thing that I'll say. He has amazing touch. Like, and when he moves really well.
And
Throws
he
a catchable ball.
really well on the move.
Yeah, throws it really well on the
Yes.
move, right? So
I believe he leads NFL quarterbacks in pass yards outside the pocket.
so he throws really well on the run. And the thing that that we haven't got to yet is that he has some winners on the outside. Like, I was skeptical of Christian Kirk because you don't see a bunch of him, and you may have more history
Right.
of breaking down that film. But they have winners on the outside. Marvin Jones historically has been a guy that can make contested catches. Zay Jones was, a guy that's, he was a question mark to me. He was a question mark, and now he's showing up with production. And their lead and their receiver core, their duo, Zay Jones and Christian Kirk, they're 3rd in the National Football League when it comes to yards with tandems, right? So, with 440 yards. So those are things that are trending well.
And a great point about Kirk. I think what happens a lot when he signed that contract, what was the responsibility?
Wait. I have a whole thing. You guys are doing a great segue right now.
Oh, okay.
So this is the end of hour 1.
All right.
I want to
we
pay
got
some
that
bills,
covered.
and I want to come right to Christian Kirk. You
Okay.
guys are awesome. You guys
Because-
almost like write the script for me.
All right.
But I do
Well-
want to hold on a second because we do have some friends at Rivers Casino and Sportsbook we want to hear from, and we will hear from them right now.
Game night for me is every night. At the place where I meet up with the guys, grab a cold one, and watch the big game on the big screen. So whether it's the money line, the pass line, or a parlay, I'm in it to win. This is my city, and this is my place.
Big thanks to our friends at Rivers Casino and Sportsbook here on Delaware Ave in Philadelphia. And as you can see, the games are already begun. We have a 9 a.m. game going on. We got people coming in, placing bets, enjoying the big screen TVs, leather recliners. It's just a great time. You were about to say something that I wanted to hit on, and that's sort of narratives, right? Because Christian Kirk signs this huge contract in the offseason, way more than anybody thought Christian Kirk was going to get. And the Jags sort of became this running joke. Oh, you got to pay the Jags tax. You got to overpay for bad talent. But he was not a bad receiver. It may not be worth that quote money, but he's made an impact on this offense.
Worth is a relative term. But,
yeah.
But Christian Kirk has a lot of talent. Okay, he was a second-round pick. He was a really good college player, and when he was in Arizona, now obviously they had Hopkins. That and Arizona has a very inconsistent pass game, so numbers may not have been there. But Kirk lines up all over. He did that in Arizona, and I think what you have to look at when teams sign a guy, they have a vision for that player.
Right.
Okay, so the money's the money. I mean, and no one begrudges anybody getting a lot of money. We hope they get as much as they can get.
Sure.
So obviously everybody responded to the money, but they had a vision for how they wanted to use Kirk because he is a multi-locational player within an offense. Okay, and that means something to Doug and that staff. So he lines up outside, he lines up in the slot, he lines up in the backfield. He's a motion movement player. So he fits everything they want. No one is suggesting that he's the best receiver in the game or a top 5 receiver.
Right.
But they had a vision for how they wanted to use him, and that had meaningful value for them. And while it's only been a 3-game sample, clearly you can see the vision.
Yes. Adam, what was the contract again, really quickly?
Yeah, $18 million a year over, I think, 4. Yeah, and the first 2 years are fully guaranteed. The day that I was at training camp, because I was talking to one of the radio people, I said, hey, who's stood out at camp? And he goes, 2 guys. Kirk's been unbelievable. To Greg's point, right now he's lining up about 60% in the slot, but the day I was there, he was everywhere, and he goes, Evan Ingram goes, look, we're surprised he's a tight end because he's built like a receiver.
He is.
And Ingram's got off to a good start. So this offense that they're running is pretty much like Doug's offense in 16 and 17. It's a spread West Coast. You're going to have 3 receivers on the field a lot, and this puts a little stress on the defense.
Jay, I want to read you a few numbers, then get a comment on something. He has 18 catches, not a lot, but good enough.
Kirk, you're talking about?
Yeah,
for Christian Kirk.
6 a game's pretty good.
Yeah, 267 yards. He's already has 3 touchdowns. Here's the thing that stands out to me. He's averaging 14.8 yards per catch, 15 yards a catch, and 67% of his catches have given the Jaguars first downs. Wow. Only 4 NFL receivers have a better first down percentage. What does that mean to you as far as the matchups that Greg was talking about, their vision for him?
I say this is why you have to watch film.
Yep.
Because you can miss a diamond in the rough. And just because a guy doesn't have production doesn't mean that he isn't a player that can be a number 1 or number 2 or give you high production as an organization. And whoever was the Jaguar scout and Doug and their team saw, hey, this guy we can get, and we may have to pay him a little bit more, but he's going to be worth it in our system, and his play, when he's called upon, has backed it up. There's guys like this in the league, and I was talking about this with Quez Watkins. Like, I'm not saying that Quez is going to get Christian Kirk's numbers, but a team is going to look at Quez and say, hey, when you were called upon, you made the most of your opportunities. We know that you can run, and you add a lot of value in a different place, and we can pay you for that value that we can bring out of you.
What's interesting is the Eagles were in on it early and out very early. There were a lot of teams on Christian Kirk, so clearly teams saw a diamond in the rough.
And he's multi-positional, multi-location within an offense.
And that's the point, because if he's just a slot, you're not.
And in fact, you said he had 3 touchdowns. One of them came out of the backfield this year. It was a great concept, a follow concept. It was it's a Doug concept. I mean, a lot of teams run it, but I saw it with the Eagles. It's a great concept.
What should be the level of concern with Avonte Maddox out and Christian Kirk? The damage that he can do from the slots. Not that they're in man a lot, but we already talked about the man and the matchup zone principles there. So
we definitely can play man, and that's what makes our defense good. You have to be able to play man. We can. Now, when you put a Christian Kirk in on a Josiah Scott, it's a clear mismatch and disadvantage toward the Eagles.
Sure.
So, yeah, hopefully we don't get that situation to happen a bunch.
Right, and that's on sort of Gannon to overcome that.
But even if it's a mismatch, like how bad of a mismatch can it be, right? Because if I'm playing some type of 2-shell over the top of it, he only can get so much, right?
Correct.
15 yards, 10 yards, so on. Now, can he paper cut me to death all the way down the field? Can we do that? That's a different defense coordinator conversation.
All right, well, certainly a matchup to watch today. Christian Kirk in the slot against Josiah Scott. And we'll see what the Jaguars and Eagles have in mind let's flip the script a little bit, fellas, and talk about another playmaker, one who plays for the Eagles and who's making about as many plays as you could ask him to make right now. He's seemingly one of the best at the moment. Jalen Hurts passed for more than 300 yards, and he's registered a passer rating over 108 for the season. This guy is playing at a level that we have not seen him play before. Some of the numbers are, he's basically top 10, and on passing yards, he's third. Completion percentage, 8th. Passer rating, 5th. Touchdowns, passing, 13th. We know he's run for a lot of touchdowns as well. But here's something. He is tied for first in completions of 40 or more yards as we start to see the downfield element of this offense exist. So, Adam, I know a lot of people have been asking us. I mean, it becomes a little bit worthy week after week of conversation about the idea of him having an extension after the year. But please remind people of the rules to the contract extension.
So you have to wait. Any drafted player must wait until he's completed his third season to extend his contract.
Right.
This is the so-called Joe Banner rule, where the Eagles under Banner would try to extend players once they knew they had the. Generally, after 2 years whether the guy's really good. So Banner and whoever's negotiating contracts with him back in the early 2000s, late 1990s, would extend the contracts early. Look, the players could say no, but they rarely did. Michael Lewis is really the only one who did.
It's hard to pass up on all that
right.
upfront money.
It's life-changing money. Why would you turn it down? So the NFLPA got wise to it, so they put in the CBA back in 11. No more of these 2-year deals.
Right.
For drafted players. Now you have to. First of all, they have to be 4 years for any drafted player, but you have to wait till after your third year. So Jalen Hurts could obviously get his contract extended. If this continues, they're going to do it. And I would argue it doesn't have to be this dynamic, but if you look at everything around him, great talent on the offensive line, arguably the NFL's best offensive line. I'd argue, Greg could attest to this, the best pass protecting line. And he's so accurate.
I would agree with that.
Okay, he's so accurate, and the thing is, he had time where he's protected last year. We could complain all we want about it. The talent around him wasn't good enough, but there were times when he's protected well. Greg would tell us he would sometimes drop his eyes, and the ball would not go downfield. We're not seeing that right now. Now, it's only 3 games. If this continues, if he plays at this, I would call it somewhat elite level, it's going to cost him a lot of money. We'll get to that down the line when we think this is probably going to happen. Because
who's his agent?
It's Nicole Lynn.
Nicole Lynn. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Let me ask you, Greg, of the 3 games he has played so far, does one jump out at you as the best Jalen Hurts, of the 3?
I don't know if it's a game per se, but it's certain things they're doing. And I think one of the things that they're doing well is taking advantage of the vertical opportunities, okay? I mean, when you look at last week, when you line up in a 2-by-2 set, for instance, okay? No matter what the coverage is, outside the numbers, it's going to be one-on-one. So if you want to throw the ball down the field, whether it's Brown or Smith, who knows, maybe they'll line Watkins out there on occasion as well, you get one-on-ones. Then it just becomes what's the technique of the corner based on whether it's man or zone, right? Yeah. But you still, outside the numbers, you're going to get one-on-ones.
Right. You can get it whenever you want to, because if it's cover 4, you just send number 2 vertical and clear the guy out. You can always get in the one-on-one.
So the Brown throw and the Smith great catch, where he dropped it in the bucket, those were 2-by-2 sets out of 11 personnel, 3 wide, and they're attacking vertically. Okay, and I think you're going to see more and more of that, because I think they feel both guys can make contested catches. That's just the reality of the league. Sure. You've got to win one-on-one. There's many ways to do that. Contested catches are a major part of this league now. And Smith, despite his size, is a great contested catch receiver, and Brown is just a man.
Right.
So, I think that's what has started to stand out to me, is the vertical element, which we never would have thought much about last year. And I think that element is going to become a pretty meaningful part of their game.
It works really well because they are contested catch makers. So if Jalen is short, like he's been short multiple times, these guys can go up and still make the play, right? It's all about giving them a catchable opportunity. And what he's learning now is that, damn, these guys are pretty good at this.
He trusts them. Jay, he trusts them, doesn't he?
And he's pretty good at it. And he's giving them opportunities, sometimes where you question the opportunity. Yeah, the safety cut, the front side safety cut the deep cross, but the backside safety was still there. He threw it anyway.
Right.
That's what I mean. The
You know, and he made it.
Right.
Sure.
Isn't that what you always talk about with the KYP, the know your personnel?
Know your
where-
personnel. Like, you know, there are situations where, you know, and it's, I'll give you a perfect example. Devontae Smith's, you know, touchdown. There's nothing that said to Jalen Hurts to go to Devontae Smith on this play. It was 17 people near Devontae Smith.
Yeah.
It was a one-on-one with A.J. Brown. He could have chose the A.J. Brown throw, and maybe he didn't like a fade on the goal line to A.J. Brown in that situation. He may not have been a great fade thrower, but he's a good corner route thrower.
Sure.
And so despite all of the action that said don't throw him the ball, he threw the ball to Devontae Smith. It ended up as a one-on-one.
Yeah.
But it was a tough throw.
Great
It
catch.
was a great throw.
Right.
But it was a better catch.
Right.
You know, he gave the spot, but the guy Moss, he was outside leverage, won it anyway.
Yeah.
You know, so there's the things that happen.
Play that needs to be mentioned, because I'm sure a lot of people thought it was an inaccurate throw. The touchdown to A.J. Brown from last week.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think that. I was to
not
keep it
an
away from the
inaccurate
D-back,
throw,
right? Yeah.
Because St. Juice was playing with inside leverage.
Right.
And it was a one-on-one, and in fact, they had lined up in that exact same formation like 3 or 4 times before in the game, so they knew what they were going to get defensively as a reaction. So he knew. In fact, he did something that probably either checked or audible to it, because you can see he did something.
He checked into it.
Right.
He changed the play call.
Because he knew what the coverage was
Yeah.
based on what happened 3 or 4 times prior.
Yep.
But St. Juice was playing with inside technique and inside leverage, so he couldn't lead Brown, or he would have thrown the ball to St. Juice basically.
Right.
So he basically back shouldered a slant. And that to me said an awful lot about Hurts.
You guys made a
You agree,
point.
by the way?
I agree with that.
Okay.
I agree with that. It could have been on his body a little bit more.
But he couldn't lead him. He
but
couldn't lead him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I got
yeah,
you.
yeah,
Exactly.
right, yeah.
But you guys made a great point on your podcast this week about A.J. Brown being able to get that ball in the end zone.
Yeah.
Right? Very uncommon for a guy to
he
be able to reach back, keep
right.
his momentum,
And then-
carry a guy for another 3 yards.
unbelievable.
He's just unbelievably strong and has great balance and all those things.
Like the Eagles in particular
I
have
would've
just
fell
not
down
had
for sure.
receivers who have been able to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. He is kind of a rare breed for
Well,
what
he
we see
did that.
here.
It might have been last year or the year before with Tennessee, where he caught a ball maybe at like the 10-yard line, and he just bullied his way into the end. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Sure.
If you look at this room, Jeff, how it has been transformed in 2 years.
The receiver room, you mean?
Let's just very quickly here. Maybe one of the worst in the NFL 2 years ago. I'm not going to say it's the best. There are a lot of good rooms.
With no speed, remember? We
Right.
used to talk
Oh, yeah,
about
I
that?
know.
With zero speed.
I mean, sorry. he was working for him then. I'm
No, they
sorry.
didn't have any speed.
Well, yeah.
Well, they had the
Quez
injuries, right?
a little bit. Well,
It was-
Quez could,
it was
but
sort
he
of
wouldn't play.
Deontay Burnett's of the world, and
Yeah.
then the. I'm trying to think who the other outside
Well,
receiver
Greg Ward was a very
Greg
important
Ward,
player,
right.
and you know I liked Greg Ward. Obviously not here anymore, but he's not fast.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
But you guys watch
Josh
a lot
Perkins.
of tape. Josh Perkins, right, who they converted to receiver. Let me ask you this question. Do you think it's one of the best rooms in the league right now, Greg, from your tape study?
I think their top 2 are really, really
Yeah,
good.
but
Quez can run, and you know more about Quez than I do, so you can certainly
Yeah.
speak here. You know, I'm not sure yet what his, other than as a vertical dimension here and there, I'm not sure how his role is going to develop. You could speak to that better than I could.
based on production, they're number 2. They're only behind Tyreek Hill and Jayden Waddle. Now, that's a totally different monster and animal in and of itself, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because of the speed element, you know.
That's more like change of direction versus contested catch.
Yeah. So based on production, they're the number 2 receiving core with like 558 yards among those 2 receivers, and then you add Quez into the mix.
Right.
And then those other 2 guys are already like 200 plus yards apiece. You know, it's unbelievable what they're doing. But yes, I think that they're going to be top 3, you know, by the end of the season, just from what I'm looking at.
Sure.
And then you add Goddard into it as another pass target.
Great point. I was just
Exactly.
going to say that.
Which
That's
doesn't get
the
enough
top.
production.
That group of 4 players.
Yeah.
It's hard to beat that. And
No,
Goddard is number 1 in the NFL yards after catch.
And with that offensive line,
Yeah.
I mean, taking
Tight end
nothing
guy.
away from Jalen Hurts,
Yeah.
because you still got to make throws.
He's been great.
But he's been standing there so secure and so
Yes.
clean in the pocket.
Yes.
I mean, there's been times it seems like he's had 4 or 5 seconds without a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back to Hurts, the deep throw that he's making this year that could be inconsistent in the past, is that because his feet are set, his mechanics are better, he's understanding of keeping his eyes
He
downfield?
understands NFL timing now. And that's the thing.
His
like
play clock is.
Yeah.
Right.
He was late getting the ball up, and I know you can agree with this last year, especially on play actions.
Yes.
When the ball, he was severely short to the point where you couldn't catch it or be intercepted, or a guy has to make an extravagant play in order to knock the ball down. Now he just understands timing, and he's getting the ball up quicker, and he realizes that he can't out-throw these guys. So why not get it up faster?
Right.
It's a great point, because most deep throws in this league are timing throws. People automatically assume a deep throw is an arm strength throw. They're not. They're timing throws. Like when he hit Devonta Smith, which was a beautiful throw, great catch too, but I mean, he put it where it needed to be, dropped it into the bucket, the 40-yard or whatever it was.
The one that should have been reviewed and come back out of bounds.
That one.
Yeah, but that's not the point.
No, I know.
The point is, that's not an arm strength throw.
touch.
That's a timing throw. Okay? So same with when he hit Brown, where he made the contested catch. Those are timing throws.
Right.
And also a belief that I know you can go get the football for me. If I'm going to throw it to you.
Right.
We saw this in training camp with A.J. Brown and Hurts. There were times when he's clearly covered. He didn't care.
Right.
Jay, you just talked about that. It's a confidence level, right?
Yeah, it's a confidence level. You, like, as a quarterback, and you know who's really good at this and he's one of the all-time greats, Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers has a sense of where the defender is, and even though he looks covered, there's always a spot on the receiver's body that's uncovered.
I remember they
And
highlighted.
he can get it to that spot. And based on your rapport with that quarterback, you understand as the route is developing which shoulder he's going to throw this ball to because of where I am covered.
Right. Now you're getting into almost anticipatory throws versus timing. Throws and anticipation throws can be a little different.
It's also ball placement.
Yeah, just ball placement.
Because that's why I felt the need to mention that touchdown to Brown, because that's when quarterbacks really take the leap. Because you're not just throwing to a guy. I remember Ron Jaworski told me a great story when he was with the Rams with Chuck Knox. And Chuck Knox would say, "Where are you throwing it?" He'd say, "I'm throwing it to Harold Jackson." And Knox would say, "No, where are you throwing it?" He'd say, "I'm throwing it to Harold Jackson." And they'd go back and forth, and finally he said, no, you're not throwing it to Harold Jackson. You're throwing to a specific spot to Harold Jackson.
Right.
And in the NFL, it's the precision of ball placement. Sure, you're throwing it to a guy, but you have to, based on coverage, whether it's zone or man, however it plays out, you're throwing it to a specific spot.
Yeah. You throw into a spot on multiple occasions.
Right.
A spot on the receiver and then a spot into the zone, wherever that is, right? Because most time, like, this is the funny thing. Most of the time when you're running routes, you can't see the quarterback and the quarterback can't see you.
Right.
That blows your mind as a fan.
It's like
I can't always see the quarterback.
Right.
I know where the ball's supposed to be, and I'm looking for the ball.
And funny that you say that, because when I interviewed Steve Young years ago for a piece I was doing for film, he said he became a great quarterback when he truly and intuitively understood that he had to make throws without knowing where the receiver
They did the
was
blindfold
going
test.
to be.
Did you see when they put the blindfold on?
Right. And by the way,
crazy.
Great quarterbacks, most throws are timing and spot throws. Most quarterbacks, when they develop that relationship over time, they could make those throws blindfolded. Because it's all timing. It's all the drop, the set, delivered to a spot.
Yeah. There was a play, you may have even highlighted it on the matchup show last year, where Aaron Rodgers threw a ball to Davante Adams that while you're watching the replay, you never see Davante Adams until the catch is made.
Right.
And he put it between three players.
Yep.
And he throws it before you even see Davante even making a break. You don't even know Davante's in the formation.
We used to do
and he just threads it right
plays on the matchup show like that with Peyton Manning all the time.
Yeah.
He'd make a throw and you'd go, "Where's the receiver?"
Right.
But to get back to Jalen Hurts, he's doing a great job of ball placement.
Yeah.
Greg talked about it. He's playing at an unbelievable. Like, I don't know how much better he can play right now. Like, there's some throws that I wish he can lead the guys a little bit. Like, we're nitpicky.
Yeah.
But other than that, he's playing at a very high level right now, and he's the NFC Player of the Month. So that speaks to it.
Well, I want to get into one part of the offense that may be able to confuse in a second. But before we get off this subject of the receivers and Jalen, I want to try to put this in some kind of historical perspective, what the Eagles have at this wide receiver position. Because I've mentioned this a few times. They've really, in my recent memory, covering the team for almost 20 years, never had two guys of this elite contested catch ability, route running ability. They've had very good receivers. I've seen Deshaun Jackson. I've seen Jason Avant. I've seen Macklin. I've seen other guys who are very productive. But you may have to go back to maybe the Quick and Carmichael days. And Adam, even those,
oh boy,
they were not in their heyday at the same time.
Harold only played 2 years with Mike, and Harold was almost at the end of his career.
Right.
He went to Dallas. I know the Eagles were not happy when he went to Dallas, we had Calvin Williams and Freddie Barnett, who were a decent tandem.
Maybe Fred and Irvin Fryer, maybe?
Irving Fryer.
Irving, did he revive his career here in Philly after New England, and then Miami, of course. But I don't think we've seen other than T.O., a physically dominant player. It's not like A.J. Brown's 6'5". He's just under 6'1". But his ability, it doesn't matter what they try to do to him. He seems to beat it. You know, you and I have talked about when he and Slay were going up against it, and he would nudge him. And I'm like, how did he do that?
Right.
Because he never gets caught for it. And I talked about the play at the Browns practice where it was a crosser, it was a shallow cross, and you were talking about you brought it up that the receiver was not in the play. I'm like, well, who is this going to? And he threw it over the middle, and Brown somehow leveraged the corner and beat double coverage. I'm like, I wish we could get that and have the replay, because how the heck did he do that?
I tell you this, explosive-wise, he's just as explosive as T.O. He's quicker than T.O., much quicker than T.O.
Really?
Yeah, much quicker.
Okay.
Now, T.O. is probably like raw speed and just tenacity. The way that he played the game was, it's great. It was great. So I'm not saying he's better than T.O. at all.
Sure.
No, but I think this conversation puts in a pretty good historical perspective that
he's an explosive
this could be, at least in modern NFL. I wasn't around for the PP host days, but
Tommy
this
McDonald,
might be,
right?
Yeah, this might be the best. Listen, we got 13 more weeks.
We got 13 more weeks.
It seems to be. It could be trending toward the.
They're
best
on the way to do
ones,
something really
best
special.
receivers.
Yeah, they are. They are really good.
All right. If there's one maybe area of concern that fans of Leafs have talked about with the Eagles' offense and worthy of discussion here, it's the sort of streakiness of their offense, their ability to rattle off 2 or 3 straight scoring drives. But obviously, the second halves have been really difficult for the Eagles' offense for a variety of reasons. But if you look at their scoring by quarter this year, 7 points in the first quarter, 14 in the third, 0 in the fourth, 65 in the second quarter. I don't know whether to say that's just coincidence or if there's a trend here that should raise some flags.
I think it's too small a sample size to make any judgment about that.
That's fair. 3 games.
I always think that I get that a lot. I do Tennessee radio, and they struggle to score in the second half. And I always say you have to look at plays. You can't just look at the whole picture and say, well, here's the problem. Because I know with Tennessee, like they would have a 3rd and 1 and they wouldn't get it because blocks were missed. That kind of thing.
Right.
So I think to me, the sample size is too small to say we have an issue at hand here. And don't forget, they were in control of those games.
Yes.
So it's not as if all of a sudden the game changed.
Right.
So I don't know what to make of that.
We've discussed the little bit of the misleading stats because against the Vikings, they drove down the field twice in the second half. They had a field goal block.
Right.
Doesn't happen every day.
Right.
And then they obviously had a whatever you want to call it, an error with Kenny Gainwell not catching a pass, and it becomes an interception. But they weren't taking their foot off the pedal. They were throwing the ball.
It wasn't as if they weren't moving the ball.
Right. But I wanted to ask what you saw against Washington, where it did seem like there was struggle to move the ball in the second half compared to the week before.
Well, Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen,
pretty good players,
make it hard for you to run the football.
I was just going to say that.
And those 2 players, I was just thinking, if Fletch goes, if we can get one of those 2 guys that just like solidify like the run game for us, like for the Eagles, I would think that would be a great move for us, But anyhow, because I love the way those 2 gentlemen play the game of football. Like they made it very, very hard for a good offensive line to sustain blocks, and they dominated, our middle 3.
They were teammates at Alabama, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
And and this is my, I won't say problem, my small critique with the Eagles is that we're having so much success throwing the ball, we kind of forget what we're the best at times. And I think we're the best at running the football. And now it's a passing league. I don't want to get into the 70-30 range. And that's where the Eagles are. 70% pass, 30% run.
First half. He just had his highest first half total
Probably
of the
even
season.
higher in the first half.
No,
Around
27.
80%.
Yeah.
27 attempts in one half. The first half was his highest of his career last week.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I'm not saying that that's always a bad thing, because the game may dictate that. But remember, we're humans. This is muscle memory. If you have the run game and that's your bread and butter and you do it 90% of the time, you're going to be good at it because of the sheer volume of practice that you're getting. When you start to kick slide 70% of the time, you're not going to be as good as at run blocking. It just doesn't work like that.
Well,
you need a balance.
Here's just a thought, okay?
Okay.
Because I'm not disagreeing, but
Yeah.
I think I know how Howie Roseman thinks, given his whole background, having been with the Eagles for so long. They used to do, when Joe Banner was there, and obviously Howie and Joe, worked together for years and years and years. They've done studies that show, and I know Joe Banner's done this, so Howie's very familiar.
I've seen it.
Yeah, that the way that to run offense the best in today's NFL is you throw to score and get ahead, and then you run to win, okay? So I think ultimately, and Jeffrey Lurie's part of this too, because he's been the owner all through this.
Big part of it.
Right. I think the belief is, and I'm not taking sides, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I think the belief is we're a passing team first. That's where we want to get to. We want to throw a lot in the first half, and we want to build up these leads.
Right.
Okay? And then ideally, it didn't work against Washington because they didn't run it effectively in the second half, but I think ideally then the goal becomes we throw a lot, we get ahead, and then we run. And we put the game away by running. But they're not going to turn around. Today could be totally different because of weather. We have no idea how today's going to be. But I think in general philosophy, the last 2 weeks is what they want to be and what they want to work toward.
But the last 2 weeks, and I agree with that, the last 2 weeks had the opposing offense been able to manufacture points. We're in a dogfight just like we were in week 1, right? So their offense were able to manufacture points and you're in a dogfight. So I understand the structure and the mentality behind it. However, our defense has played lights out these last 2 weeks, and I don't necessarily know if that's going to be sustainable over the stretch of games with good offenses.
Did you see from Kelsey and Sayamalu, and then obviously I guess Opeta had to come in at some point. I never caught when he came into the game, but when they're asked to run and be physical against guys like Allen and Payne, is that where they're always going to? Well, Sayamalu's a pretty strong guy, but there have been some times this year, maybe with the position switch, that he's just not comfortable.
I would bet that if you spoke to people around the league who watch tape, they would say that Sayamalu might be the weakest link, but not a weakness, but the weakest link in a really good O-line.
Sure.
Yeah, and yes, big, strong, physical guys like that. Jason Kelsey is better when he's free and he can go and double team and he can lead out and different things like that. He's an athletic guy. But when you get a bigger guy that's physically imposing, it's a struggle for him. So, and our team knows that, and everyone knows that. But the guards usually are there to help and assist and things like that. I'm not saying that he can't hold his own because he's a Pro Bowler. He can hold his own, but this is a different level of strength. With those two guys, those were two of the best run stoppers in the league.
Right, given that, because Adam has brought this up many times, that maybe what makes this offense complete or would make it complete is in these situations when you're up big and it's the fourth quarter or second half, you're trying to then run, is to have a bigger grinder who, even if your line is not getting great push, kind of falls forward and gets the 2 or 3 yards. So is this where Trey Sermon might be able to make a difference? He's up today.
Eagles inactives, Ian Book, Avante Maddox, we knew he was out. Blankenship again, Scott again, we knew he has rib injury, he couldn't play. Janarius Robinson and Josh Sills.
Interesting, Josh Sills.
He's out,
he's out
today.
He's been out. But yeah, do you feel like Trey Sermon is sort of the missing piece, Adam, in what we talked, having that closer to go get you those grinding yards?
He could be. Look, he could be.
That's probably why he's here.
4-minute offense, he could do that.
He's a talented back, and a big issue in San Francisco was that they thought he didn't understand what it meant to be a pro, not the talent.
Right.
So.
Yes.
Zay Jones is inactive.
He is
inactive today.
That's a big deal.
So Agnew may play more, and you're
going to get Tim Jones, the Southern Miss kid.
And Jones, you said, has some speed. Is that his?
Yeah, Jones. Again, he was He was a draft choice, wasn't he?
No, undrafted.
Undrafted.
Yes.
He was worthy of being drafted based on.
He looked
my
good the
tape
day
study.
I was there because I was not familiar with him. He play after play, and I asked one of the personnel guys to tell me about him, and they identified him before the draft. So he's going to have to play today. And again, conditions will dictate if they throw it all.
Right.
You got to throw it at some point, opposite third down when it's more than 2 or 3 yards. But it's going to be fascinating to see the approach of both teams and how they do that. I want to ask Jason a question. When you were drafted by the Eagles, did you have an idea what Andy was all about in terms of the passing game? Do you know, okay, these guys want to throw the ball here? Did you know that when you were drafted?
I didn't, because I didn't really pay attention to NFL football. I'm always a tunnel vision guy, focused on what I had to do. And I didn't think that I would go to Philadelphia at all in general. I thought I was either going to be a Steeler or a Patriot.
Did they talk to you, the Eagles?
Yeah, they did talk to me at, the combine.
Right.
And they asked me to draw concepts. And I was like, oh, this is simple.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they,
Nice.
they were asking me the concepts of what do I do with this route in cover 2 or cover 4 or cover thing. I say, well, you can do it like this. I've seen coaches do this, but I like it this way. And they drafted me, but I didn't expect
But
it.
after you were drafted, or a period of weeks and months, you kind of see, okay, I think Andy wants to throw the ball out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
you
yeah,
know
yeah,
that
yeah,
right away.
You knew that
yeah,
immediately.
You knew that right away. And I knew that when I got here, what my role would be. And so it wasn't just that I knew that he liked to throw the ball. They had communication. Hey,
Sure.
this is the role that we want you. Watch this guy. Watch this. This is what we want from you. And it was clearly defined. And that's what I love about Coach Reed is that there's no ambiguity.
Right.
You don't have to worry about, hey, you're going to, hey, buddy, I have, I got to get the ball to Brian Westbrook. You're not getting the ball as much as you think you are, but I can get to you 5-6 times a game. You got to get open.
So on the studies that Joe Banner was talking about, so Joe told me that they would assign analytical people to go research what wins going back to the 60s and 70s. So when Joe and I worked at ESPN together, I was sort of skeptical. I'm like, come on, throwing the ball this much in the first half? He would show me the data. I'm like, why aren't all teams doing this?
Well,
It's so obvious.
One of the things that led a lot of people to sort of reassess and think along the lines of Joe is what the Cowboys did in their dynasty years. Because in those years with Aikman, Smith, and Irvin, everybody just assumed they were built on Emmett. But when they got to the playoffs, Aikman became the driving force of their offense. They threw the ball in the first halves of these games and got ahead, and then they'd run Emmett, and Emmett would run for 150, and Aikman would not throw for 350 because he'd only throw 7 balls in the second half or 8 balls in the second half. So his numbers wouldn't be great, but they'd throw in the first half.
And that skews the pass-run ratio. People are like, oh, wait a minute, see, it's balanced. No, they were coming out throwing.
Right.
The other thing too is that when you throw the ball, you have the ability to make mistakes. It's hard to overcome mistakes when you're a running team.
Right.
Right? So if you get a penalty, a holding, and whatever it is, a PI or whatever it is, takes you forever to make that up.
You're behind the sticks now.
You're behind the sticks all the time. And on a passing team, get big chunks, we know this, but also you avoid third down.
Right.
Third down is a very, very pressured down that you have to execute. You throw the ball, you avoid third down, and usually the teams that are winning by a lot, they don't have a lot of third downs.
Right. All right, great stuff. All right, everybody, please check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan, that's their motto, so make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com. So we've got some scores in here from the YouTube chat, and not surprisingly, a lot of people, Eagles fans, think the Eagles are going to win.
Yeah.
Some big. Bradley Bropes says 24-14 Birds. Carl Stevenson has the Eagles winning 27-17. John Smith says Birds 30, Jags 12. Ed Rush, he's got a close one. Eagles winning 21-17. You can see some of the scores. The rain is influenced now. You got some shorter totals. Tyree Eagle says 31-17 Birds, and Kwan says 23-18 Eagles. Last week we had somebody who predicted Washington. We have one guy predicting Washington to win.
Right story.
I have not seen yet anyone predicting the Jags to win. All right, so we will get some more score announced as the time goes on here. Make sure you leave your comment, question, or your score prediction in the chat box. Let us talk about the trenches a little bit here.
Let's talk Jags D now.
That's where we're going.
We're going
right there now.
We got to get into it. because it doesn't get a lot of attention, but they bring the 7th best overall defense into the link today and the top-ranked rushing defense. They allow 3.1 yards per rush and just 55 yards on the ground per game. We had multiple Patreon subscribers ask us this question for you, Greg, and it's really about Jaguars' front seven. Is that the biggest problem area for the Eagles today, what the Jags do in their front seven?
Yeah, it's a problem.
It's a problem.
First of all, they clearly have a type of what they want because they are long, they're athletic, and they're multi-positional. And you have to understand, Mike Caldwell, he came from Tampa. He worked with Bowles. So what did they have in Tampa? They had David and White. Okay, so now what did they do in the offseason, a linebacker as well? They signed Oluokun, who a lot of people might not be aware of, but he's a really good 3-down player.
Kid from Yale, right?
He was a safety in college, so he's a very athletic linebacker.
Yeah.
And with their second first-round pick, they drafted Devin Lloyd, who's 6'2", long and very athletic, and has been really good in pass coverage through the first 3 games.
A lot of Eagles fans wanted him in the pre-draft process.
So now
Always
you
one of
have
the linebackers.
They've got Trayvon Walker, who's 6'5" and multi-positional.
Right.
They've got Arden Key, 6'5", multi-positional.
I'm a big fan of that guy.
Had a really good year in San Francisco last year. Finally started to be what people thought he could be when he came out of LSU a number of years ago.
Yeah.
They have Josh Allen, long, athletic, a really good edge rusher. They got Smoot, 6'3". He can play inside or outside. And then they've got some really good rotational players who are really good. They're just not well-known names, in Robertson Harris and Hamilton, 52. So they have a lot of players. They're long, they're athletic, and they can line up in different spots. And Trayvon Walker is really a really good athlete.
How does their front look compared to like with the Eagles with their 4-man front or 5-man front? Are they similar or are they more like what Tampa does?
They're probably more like Tampa overall.
Right.
But they will. Everybody plays a 5-man front now here
That's
and
true.
there.
That's true. Yeah.
But they're more because they want their 2 linebackers on the field all the time.
Right.
So they don't play a lot of 5-man fronts in nickel, you know, because they want both linebackers, unless they decide to, let's say, put Lloyd on the line of scrimmage for a play. But for the most part, they're a 4-2 nickel front team.
What did they do to the Chargers last week? We know that Herbert was hurt, but what did you think of their defense against the Chargers last week?
I think they physically kicked their you-know-what.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, they are really good up front. And then you get into that same question. The Chargers are a very one-dimensional offense. They didn't run the ball. They don't run the ball. And
you're out Keenan Allen.
They were missing a couple of guys, like Slater, Allen. Yeah.
And Slater got hurt.
Right.
So they were kind of weak at tackle. But, I mean, they're – and in the secondary, by the way, and then Jay can jump in here, they're also long in the secondary. Is Griffin active today?
Griffin may be down.
Griffin is
down?
up. He was not on the inactive.
He was not on the inactive.
Yeah, yeah.
So they have 2 corners who are 6'1" and bigger. Tyson Campbell, second-year player at Georgia, 6'1". Griffin's over 6'1".
And the safety Jenkins is a big
safety
dude.
Jenkins
he's
is a big guy, and he's playing really well. And Cisco's a second-year guy from Syracuse, and he's a pretty good player, too.
You got Darius Williams.
Yeah, and Darius Williams is their nickel.
Again, it's only 3 games. But when I was in training camp, I was like, okay, they're very talented, but I don't know when they're going to put this together. Take a couple years. I'm not saying they're going to win the division.
No.
But they are so far in advance where I thought they would be. It's a pretty gifted team.
Here's the thing that impressed me a bunch. Now, I've been knowing Coach Caldwell for years, and I know that he's an excellent football coach. He lit them up. He knew that Justin Herbert had problems with his ribs, missing the left tackle. That blitz started to come a little bit more.
Yeah.
And they disguised coverage extremely well. There's times where the interception that happened that kind of changed the outcome of the game at the beginning of the game, it looked like it was going to be a cover 4, rush down to a cover 2, gets a hit on the guy, and, you know, of course the running back should have caught the ball, but he would have been in that position. He wouldn't have had that tight, window to throw the ball into. I'm saying that wrong. Well, let's start over.
Cut that out.
Corner, cut it out. The cornerback came up pretty quickly, and then I don't think that Justin Herbert recognized the coverage, and it was because it was a great disguise.
Okay.
So they're blitzing at a high rate. I saw some late stunning that led to a stat.
They're really good with stunts. Really good
like
with
a
stunts.
late stunt that got home. Like so, they're diverse on the back end as well.
So Mike Caldwell has coached under Todd Bowles for quite a while, not just Tampa, but also with the Jets, with the Cardinals, and we know that Todd and Tampa last year seemed to have the best game plan, at least the most productive one, against last year's version of Jalen Hurts. Do you think he brings last year's Tampa Bay concepts into this year's game against Jalen Hurts?
You have similar personnel.
Yes.
So if you have similar personnel, you're going to see it. And what it's going to do is that you may see some man coverage, and you're going to see them try to get home. But Jalen Hurts doesn't move as much as he did last year. So it may render ineffective, but this is one of those games, and we talked about it a few weeks ago. There's only a few defenses left that Jalen Hurts has to see, and I believe now Mike Caldwell is not a veteran defensive coordinator, but he comes from that tree, and he has a defense that's very athletic, that can stunt, that can play man coverage, and that can disguise on the back end. So you have a defensive coordinator that's going to be a proving ground for Jalen Hurts.
And when they do play man, one matchup to look for is Goddard. Lloyd has been the tight end matchup when they've played man versus 11 personnel. When they played cover 1 versus 11 personnel, Lloyd has been the matchup most of the time.
And that's the great thing when you have a linebacker that can cover tight end, right? Because that's normally that's a no-go. But he's very athletic, has 2 picks as the AFC Defensive Rookie of the Month, right?
That's the key.
That's right. So they're tied #1 in the league with 8 turnovers.
Sure.
They have 5 interceptions and 3 fumbles. So they can get the ball back.
Is there someone in that back end that, and I don't know if we've seen this yet this year, but who can serve as a spy on Jalen? If they're going to pressure Jalen, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Well,
would
if
someone
they choose to take that approach and they want to play man, I would think Oluokun would be the spy.
Okay.
Because he's athletic, and you don't want to spy with a D lineman, and maybe, or could it be Jenkins, the safety, in certain situations, because Cisco is ultimately a back end player as well. It could be.
Yeah.
So what the Buccaneers did last year, they didn't have to use a hybrid player from the secondary.
Okay.
Devin Lloyd is fast enough to be able to get to Jalen Hurts.
Sure.
And just like Devin White was able to. So I don't necessarily think that they need a spy because their linebackers can roll. They can run.
Right.
And this is one of those defenses that will present that problem to Jalen Hurts.
John DiFilippo, in his interview with us for our Patreon subscribers, said that after watching 3 games, he thinks that Jalen's playing at a great level, but if you're gonna defend him, probably want to blitz him more than sit back and cover. Do you guys agree with that? After what you've seen for 3 days, you probably want to force the issue a little more?
I think you do, and then with an understanding of how he likes to get out of the pocket. That's the key thing. One of the things that coaches study with quarterbacks that can move and have second reaction ability is how they react to pressure. Is where do they move? What is their first instinctive move? You have to take care of that, because if you're going to blitz and rush Jalen Hurts, he is going to move.
Right.
So you have to know where he's going to move.
Right.
I think that you can't just haphazardly blitz.
No, you got to have a plan.
Yeah,
right.
You have to have a plan. And I think it's dangerous. This is dangerous, especially like if I were Caldwell, whenever I have Darius Williams out there in base and I get an opportunity to blitz Jalen Hurts, I would, because that's a guy that kind of understands. Darius Williams understands that this blitz can get home and knows how to play. And so when you have that secondary move from Jalen Hurts, it's a guy that's sitting on a route.
Yep.
So different things like that. So I think you have to have a plan with it. The best team we've seen play Jalen Hurts is the Buccaneers.
Right.
So I think that everything that you see from that game, and I'm sure the Eagles are studying the Buccaneers game for last year.
Right.
But I also think that the Eagles' pass game now with A.J. Brown is different.
Yes.
And I think they've probably expanded their concepts as well.
Sure.
I mean, as Adam knows, if you speak to people with the Bucs and around the league, they'll tell you that the Eagles' offense wasn't really that difficult to defend a year ago in that playoff game.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's different now, but it's just
totally
different.
different.
Yeah,
You know,
a lot
I love,
different.
you know what I love about defense coordinators? I love the ones that'll get back and cover 2. And cover 2 is a tough defense to play. Tampa 2.
Yeah.
They'll do it on first down.
Right.
They'll do cover 2 on first down. And the way you do it, you have to have winners up front.
You got to win up front.
And you got to have a linebacker that you really trust to be able to run the seam. And they have that. And if they can make the Eagles one-dimensional, that's a very, very tough component to contend with passing the ball.
It becomes a real battle of the trenches at that point.
Well, then it becomes, because the key thing in cover 2 is you got to be able to rush the quarterback with 4.
Right.
Because otherwise the voids show up. You know, the way I was taught about cover 2 is a defense for the timing of 3-step and 5-step. If you get beyond that timing, then your pass rush has to get there because there's too many voids.
Too many voids,
Yeah,
right.
you're right.
Also got to be able to stop the run with 6 usually when you play cover 2.
Well,
on
no,
first down,
cover
right?
2, you're wrong.
Oh,
if I may
okay.
say so, Jeff.
Yeah, sure.
You know how
You
cover
bet.
2 started?
Yeah.
Cover 2 started with Bud Carson when he was the head coach at Georgia Tech in the late 60s before he became the Steelers defensive coordinator.
Right.
And cover 2 was used as a run defense because technically in cover 2 you have 9 defenders because your 2 corners play on the line of scrimmage because they're not deep defenders.
Right.
So you actually have 9 defenders to play the run.
But how
So cover
effective is
2
that on an inside run? You having your corners at the line of scrimmage.
I mean, if you're going to run between the guards, no. But I mean, obviously, if you're running outside, your corners are primary run defenders.
Right.
Yeah, but both of you guys are right in this, right? So yes, inside runs you have less defenders.
Right.
Now there's only a few teams that can play cover 2 with effective corner play. Now
A lot
there's
of corners aren't built to tackle also.
Well, no, wait.
these days.
There's some teams like the Ron Rivera teams that would get into cover 2. Their corners would read run so quickly and beat that block into it because they're responsible, right, for the run to be able to stop it.
Sure,
So you have to be a cover 2 essential team in order to get those corners crashing in. Like there's guys that crashing in based on what a running back is. He's in this set, I'm crashing.
And by the way, the Colts were great at this. If you anticipate cover 2, okay, and this is all film study now, but if you anticipate cover 2, you could line up someone like Devonta Smith to the boundary, okay, and run fake outside zone to the boundary,
Right.
which is going to get the corner to sit there, okay, because he's a run defender to the boundary. Then you get Smith releasing inside versus that corner screaming at the safety with a 2-way go.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, and the Colts used to do that with Marvin Harrison when they do that stretch zone run with Edgerrin James to the boundary. The corner sat because he's a run defender.
Sure. All right, good stuff. Let us talk about our friends who helped make this show possible, and that's our production team of Public Square and Rebel Hill. They are back again this year for us. The team of James and Zach are behind the controls, bringing Inside the Birds to you in high definition with great graphics, videos, and more. So contact Public Square Media and Rebel Hill Productions to produce your webcast, podcast, live show, or anything else you can dream of. This team can bring it to life. You know, Adam, people ask us all the time, I want to start a podcast. I'm a content producer. How do I make it happen? And we say, well, first, you have to have the content that people want to see. But then secondly, you got to be able to present it. You can't just go on camera and talk. You got to spice it up. And that's where Rebel Hill and Public Square Media are just fantastic to have on our side.
Yeah, and if you want to do a commercial, they could do that for you as well.
Absolutely.
Which we know.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate everything that Public Square and Rebel Hill do for this show. Really quick before we start to wind it down here, it's noteworthy that Doug Pederson brings a ball control, time and possession offense here to the link today because nobody would be surprised to hear that.
It's amazing.
In his 5-6 years as head coach, he's usually top 5, usually top 2 in the NFL in time of possession. This year, the Jags are second in the NFL in time of possession, 34-35. You remember as Eagles head coach, both in 2016 and 17, they led the NFL in time of possession. They fell all the way to 4th in 2018, and then 2019 right back up to 2nd. And then we all know 2020 was kind of the crumble it up and throw it out year.
Disaster.
But that is a Doug Pederson offense, and it seems like he's got the Jags.
It's amazing because if you look at the run game, you wouldn't say it's super explosive.
Or the offensive line, you say is not necessarily
Etienne
one of
has
the
not
best.
had a great season so far. I know James Robinson has recovered nicely from his Achilles. But you wouldn't think that they're second in time of possession almost most 35 minutes.
Right.
I wouldn't have thought that, but I know it's only 3 games. But Pederson's, and the other part about it is Pederson's teams run a lot of plays. Mm-hmm. That was the one thing. If you look at his Eagles teams when they were really good, they were amongst the top teams in plays ran per game.
The thing I'll say about that is that schemed up third down, because third down is one of those downs where it's a pressure down, and usually teams do what they do best, right? So if they want to go man coverage, there's only a few coverages that you get, so it's an easy read for offensive coordinator or quarterback. And Coach Reed's offensive coaches, they're going to carry 30 third down plays into a game plan. Right? And they're going to be seeing, all right, so here they played us this. The chances of they're going to cover 4. This down is very high. We got that play.
Sure.
So in order to be high, you have to be a good third down team in time of possession.
Good stuff. Let's get into our rapid fire segment before we wrap this thing up. All right, Jason, I'm going to start with you. Rapid fire, we get a pretty quick answer here. All right, I ask you a question, you just tell me what you think. Who has a bigger game today with the rain and the running game especially kicking into gear? Miles Sanders or James Robinson?
Go, Miles Sanders.
Why?
Offensive line, we're better built for a rainy game, I believe.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Greg, both of these teams have been fairly safeguarded with the football. Very good, clean, efficient. We just talked about time of possession there. With the rain and the game plan, are you expecting both teams to be careful with the ball still, or are you expecting a little bit of a slop fest today?
Well, the goal is to be careful.
I know what the goal is.
It
what
is?
are you expecting, though?
Yeah. I think that's going to be the approach, but you can't predict whether there'll be fumbles or, those kind, which could well happen.
Right.
But that's going to be the goal.
If I put an over-under on total turnovers at 3 between both teams, would you take the over or the under?
I'd probably take the over.
Over 3 all right, so maybe a little bit
Fumbles.
more.
Jason was talking about ball security. It's hard, right?
I'm assuming serious rain. If
Yeah.
it slows down,
Yeah.
that changes everything. But
Yeah.
if we're talking about serious rain, yes.
Yeah, on my way here, I saw a big boat and 2 of each animal getting in, so it's going on out there.
Where's the Noah's Ark? Yeah.
Adam, how many carries today for Trey Sermon? More or less than 5?
I'm going to say more.
More than 5.
Well, remember, no Boston Scott.
Right.
Is Miles Sanders a great closer? Kenny Gainwell can't be that guy.
Okay.
Gainwell's, we've seen him work in short yardage. He's actually been pretty good in it.
So then you're expecting a fourth quarter lead for the Eagles.
Look, why claim off waivers?
Right.
We talked in August and July that they're looking for a back with size. They finally got that guy. I understand Sermon was a disappointment with the Niners, but he's here. They've kept him on the roster for a while. Mm-hmm. He's now active as their third back. We know Gainwell's a specialty back. Why not give him 5 to 7 carries in his first game? What's wrong with that? Because if you've got to lead in the fourth quarter, particularly in this weather, if the rain continues like it has been, you're going to have to run the ball.
Sure, absolutely. All right, so Adam says bigger day for Trey Sermon, more than 5 carries.
We'll see.
We shall see. Yeah. All right, we will get into our player of the game. This was a fascinating week for player of the game. We had a little last week we had 3 guys pick Dallas Goedert, who you loved that touchdown, didn't you?
I did.
That little screen.
Yeah,
Explain why you liked it so much.
Great concept.
I like the screen, but I liked it because he did a basketball hip swivel. It's a move that you see like Tyler Hero, James Harden do it before they go to the hole. It throws the defender off. And to make a guy miss in that shortest in that little window for a tight end is very impressive.
Yeah, you and Q got very giddy on the podcast about that.
Yeah, I think the safety closed his eyes, really.
Oh, okay.
But it was good.
He really not want to tackle.
Yeah, he didn't want to tackle.
Great concept.
Did he actually say that? No, I'm just kidding.
Good concept in that.
The tape told you that.
They showed a power run look, but they didn't do it with the guard. They did it with the tackle. So it made it really look like a run. And both Davis and Holcomb went hard inside, and that set up the 2 blocks. I think it was Sayamalu and Kelsey, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and they set up the angles for the blocks, and it was just a really well-designed play.
Nice. All right, players of the game. There's, again, common theme here. Let's start with...
well, this was before the rain.
This is before the rain.
Yeah.
But nobody changed their pick, so I'm going...
I was late, so I anticipated the rain.
All right, there you go. Jason Avant, who is your player of the game today?
T.J. Edwards. Rainy game, has to run the ball, guide us around the football. It's just the perfect day for a linebacker.
Guess what? He's their defensive MVP through 3 games.
Through 3 games.
He's been great.
He's been excellent. And not just against the run, right? In coverage, he has
held up his end of the bargain there. Yeah.
All right, TJ Edwards for Jason. Greg Cosell, who is your player of the
Well,
game
this was
today?
before I knew it was going to rain hard. I said A.J. Brown, so I got to stick with it.
Were you not following this whole hurricane thing that was going up the east?
I did, but
It's a little
you know,
news. I mean,
I did. I
No.
didn't realize the effect it would have here.
Right. Gotcha. By the way, on a serious note, everybody from the show, sending our thoughts, our prayers to everybody out in South Florida and impacted by Hurricane Ian. It's not a laughing matter. The footage is serious, and I know a lot of people in this area either have been to, have relatives who live at Ian, or are just, frequenters of that part of the state of Florida. So hoping for a speedy recovery there. Adam, who is the player of the game today?
I'm going to throw a change up here. I'm going to go with Fletcher Cox. He's going to build on what he's done. You've got cold weather, a lot of run. You got to bust that line and make James Robinson change direction. Yeah, I just feel like Fletcher Cox is coming on here. It's about time he has a dominant game.
All right. Well, me and Jay had some telekinesis going on. I picked TJ Edwards also as my player of the game. I was kind of anticipating a lot of running between these two teams, and TJ has been, as Adam mentioned, I think you can safely put him in the category as one of the best defensive players for the Eagles this year, if not their best. So, dime linebacker. He is their dime. Who would have thought that?
Still can't, you never would have believed it.
We're still
a year ago. Get out of here.
We're still getting asked, when is Nakobe Dean going to play? And we keep saying, over who? When are you going to get him?
By the way, it's a good problem to have.
It is a great problem to have.
You know that other than specials, he's just not going to play.
It's a different problem to have at linebacker than the Eagles have had for the last 3 or 4 years. He's on their practice squad.
The Eagles practice squad.
Yeah, he's on the Eagles practice squad. Wow. All right. Let me tell you about Rivers Casino here in Philadelphia, Rivers Casino and Sportsbook. Food right here at Jack's is now available at Bet Rivers Sportsbook every weekend and for every Birds game. They've got great specials. We're talking $2 Miller Lights, $15 bottomless chips and salsa, $12 pretzel bites, and $16 easy peel shrimp. They've got the home field advantage spin and win contest for bettors who place qualifying game day bets in the sportsbook. They can enter the spin to win contest, which is held every home game. You enter by placing at least a $50 bet on pro football. Maximum number of entries is 3 per transaction. 8 winners are pulled, and via random drawing to spin the wheel. The prizes include free play, cash, and 2 tickets to an Eagles home game. If the Eagles win, 2 more winners are selected. They also have the Choose the Champs Weekly Pick'em Challenge. And in September, well, it's not September anymore. So I
October.
guess the 88,000 River of Clubs thing is gone. That'll probably be back next time. But the Choose the Champs Challenge, all Rush Rewards members get 1 free entry into the game. Free play prizes are awarded to the top 20 finishers, with first place winning $1,000 in free play. So all of that here at Rivers Casino and Sportsbook, where Philly loves a winner. Now the line on this game, the Eagles for the 4th straight week are favored. Last I checked at Rivers Casino or at the Bet Rivers
By the way,
app.
when will they be a dog, you think? Maybe at Dallas, maybe at some point this year?
I don't know. It kind of depends on how Dallas does these next 2 games. So if they're 5-1 or 4-1, then yeah.
Right, and the Green Bay game is here,
Correct.
right?
The Green Bay game is here.
Right,
yeah.
okay. Eagles probably
Yeah,
be a
it's going
favorite.
to be fascinating to see when they are the dog. Today, the Eagles are 6.5-point favorites, and the total right now at Bet Rivers or on the Bet Rivers app is 44. So that's a little down from, it was 45.5 earlier. I'm guessing the rain influencing that. We start with you, Jason. Who's winning this game? What's the score?
I have the Birds 23-17, I believe.
You do have the
Yeah,
Birds winning 23-17.
23-17.
So that would be not a cover. That would be a 6-point win, not 6.5. So, but
Hey,
that's fair.
listen,
That's
yeah.
all right. That's all right. Greg, who's winning the game today?
I believe I picked the Birds. And
You did.
I think I did 27-23.
27-24.
There you go.
All right. That is also not a cover, but it's a win. That's all that matters.
Again, based on the fact that I wasn't going to.
Yeah, you know the weather would be like this.
Sure.
Well,
Now that is over though, 51. Obviously, again, the weather factors in. Jason also with the over at 50. Adam, what's the score today? Who wins?
So I've got a 23-17 Eagles. Now,
same as Jason.
I've been tracking the weather all week, and as I told you, we're going to get the hurricane from, Ian from down south, and we're not getting the lightning, but we're getting the rain.
Right.
And as you can see on the water here, right in front of us behind Jack's,
Yeah.
it's not stopping. So I'd be surprised if it got to 40. There'd have to be a lot of turnovers in short field.
Right.
But I'm interested to see how not only Hurts, but how Sirianni and his group of coaches call this game. We know that Shane Steichen's the play caller, so I guess they'll feel it out. obviously the intensity of the rain, Greg brought this up, that will tell you how much they'll throw today.
Right.
You can throw in the rain, but if it's intense, you're not going to throw a lot.
All right,
It's not
well,
just the rain, it's the wind.
the
wind too, yeah,
that-
thank you, yes.
It wasn't so bad
For sure.
this morning, but it might be picking up
Yeah.
as the day goes on. I have very close to you guys, the Eagles winning 24-17. So three of us, me, Adam, and Jason, are under the 44 level, but we all say the Eagles win. Remember, you can bet the game right here at Rivers Casino Sportsbook or on the Bet Rivers app. Want to thank Rivers Casino, Sky Motor Cars, the teams at Rebel Hill, and Public Square. Make sure you're checking out coverage of the game immediately after on InsideTheBirds.com, and then also the Inside the Birds post-game live with myself, Adam Caplan, Trey Thomas. It's on our Facebook page, our Twitter page, and of course our YouTube platform that most people watch it on. So for Jason Avant, Greg Cosell, and Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the game.